The following podcast is proudly brought to you by Vite Ramen. Use the link in the description and use offer code BrokenSilicon to get 10% off tasty, healthy, and easy to make ramen. And also use the offer code BrokenSilicon to get 30% off all Windows keys and die shrink to get 3% off everything else at cdkeyoffer.com. All right, on with the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and let's just get right into it. I am, of course, today joined by my co-host,
Dan.
How you doing, Dan?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I mean, it's been a crazy year. I'm going to be honest. I'll just say that right out of the gate. That's just what's coming to mind. You know, as I do a disclaimer first that, we're recording this and then the next one that will be with David, a week or so before they come out. Well, this one actually should be literally a week before it comes out, as we prepare to have the content you would expect during the holiday season. So just so everyone knows what they're listening, yep, this is coming out right before Christmas. There will be another one coming out. So yeah, what would that be? Like right after Christmas, there will be a die shrink as expected. I may get a couple of videos out during the holiday break as well and a live stream. But, of course, a couple of these podcasts are recorded ahead of time as our tradition for giving ourselves a couple of weeks off is looking back at the year we've covered. And this year is insane. As I was putting the notes together, Dan, the notes this year for looking back are longer than before, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's to the point that I didn't even bother to put as much detail into each bullet point because there's just dozens of stories to at least glance over. And then, of course, the next episode will be looking forward with David Does Tech Stuff. It seems to be another tradition of the end of year podcast. He seems to always be involved, but I think jolly festive cheer comes to mind when I think of David Does Tech Stuff. He's very joyful person to talk to. So there's a reason I keep calling him back. And I'm actually very excited for how I've organized the notes for that one. It should be really fun, but that is not this one. Let's get into the opening reader mails. AC666 writes in, "Oh, hear ye, Dan, thou master slayer of fish. It is through the effort of thou brother, and thy community that I hast found the path of the computer and the semiconductor. So I doth ask you, student of Harvard," I think we'll say right now, not a student of Harvard. We could have said, eventually someone would probably figure it out, but they don't know us. Maybe, sure, you're a student of Harvard. Have any tips for the internship interview? Happy holidays and have a good one.
I'm not sure what you're interviewing for, but I would say, just be yourself, be honest, and, know a decent amount of information about whatever you're interviewing for.
Yeah, that's some real posh advice there, Danny. I'm not sure why you went into that accent, but I'll help you with that a little bit. No, I think, you didn't say which interview. You mentioned college, so I don't know if you're interviewing to get into a college or an internship program or, you said internship interview, so I don't know where it's at, but I would just say, honestly, the best thing you can do is just do your research ahead of time and just go in and be yourself. It's such annoying advice to give. I've interviewed, quite a few times, and I got job in several automotive companies and internships. So I think I'm pretty good at it. But honestly, half of it is knowing that you wouldn't have applied for something you can't do, and you'd be surprised what you can do. Trust me, I've worked at these major engineering companies. A lot of the people there are the smartest people I've ever met in my life, but not all of them are. You're probably qualified, right, if you applied. So just go in and answer questions honestly.
Yeah, and if they have any of those, like, traditionally hard quote unquote interview questions like, what's your biggest weakness or whatever. Okay. Don't give one of the canned responses. Like, I care too much. That is not a good answer. Yeah.
Dead of Night writes in, some games talk would be cool for this episode. Maybe just a section covering the Game Awards or things you recommend people play. Well, we're going to have a die shrink that comes out about that during the holiday season, so I won't dwell on that too much. But since this is coming out before Christmas and you'll likely have already been gaming for a week before then, I don't know. Let's answer that second question first. I mean, I really recommend Hitman 3, like a lot.
Yeah, I still need to get into Hitman 3. I might be able to get into it a little bit over the holiday season. We'll see.
And just specifically because Hitman 3... both on console and on PC, lets you, if you get all the right packages, upgrade Hitman 1's levels, Hitman 2's levels to Hitman 3 graphics, and like using even some of the newer weapons and mechanics and stuff. Effectively, you can get like 40 missions if you have a sale for like $60. And look, I understand why someone might not want to get like Hitman 3 for like 60 or I assume it was $60. On PlayStation 5, for example, or Steam at launch, because it's only like 5 or 6 missions. But each one of those missions is legitimately replayable a few times at least. And so then when you have 40 of those, it's absurd, the amount of content you have. And they do keep adding stuff. They just added a new pack. Outside of that, I'd say Far Cry 6. But again, we're going to get into that more game talk in a die shrink. But I'll say right now, Far Cry 6 is already going on sale. It is the most absurdly underrated game I think we've seen in a while.
Yeah, it definitely is.
I get the criticism of Call of Duty and Battlefield this year. I do not get the mixed reviews for Far Cry 6.
No, like I think we've said this before. It feels like they're reviewing a different Far Cry game.
Right. And it's not like one of those things where it's like, hey, I like this game. I'm mad you said bad things. It's like, I literally don't believe you played the game because what you're describing isn't this game.
Or this is what they expected to write and they didn't want to deviate from it. So they like went in just expecting it to have not changed at all.
I honestly think that's what it is. And I talked to you about this before, specifically about Far Cry. Like, how often does a reviewer at IGN get to review a Far Cry game? You know, sometimes you'll have people that you'll expect, like in the Xbox division of IGN. We knew who was going to review Halo, you know, but a lot of these reviewers, I don't know that they always get to be the person that did the yearly or even bi-yearly Far Cry. Now Dan's checking to see if it was the same person every time. And I think a lot of times people were like...
check that it isn't.
Right, okay.
It does change.
Right. So I think a lot of times you have this issue in review websites where they go, oh, this year you get to review Far Cry. And they're like, yes, I've had criticisms about Far Cry for 3 years. And then they just give this canned review. And like, this is the most different Far Cry since 2 to 3. Like the deviations from the previous ones are immense. It's not the same as 5. It's actually absurdly better than 5. And 5 is the one you should level criticism as for being just like the previous 2 by far.
Oh, yeah.
But I think someone wanted to do a Far Cry 5 review, couldn't. It's their turn. They say it. And I think that's where you get a lot of weird Call of Duty reviews as well, by the way, where you get like, for some reason, like you get that infamous, I think there was an IGN review for Call of Duty Ghosts where they're like, it's really not a good game, but it's still Call of Duty, 9 out of 10 or some absurd thing.
I think it was an 8, but yeah, there was some like weird thing with, I believe it was Ghosts, where they were like, yeah, this isn't really a good game, but we're giving it an 8 because we think we have to. It might as well have been what they said.
Right. Yeah. And so, except that was the one year where you probably should have been extra critical of Call of Duty more so than any other years. But they're like, I just got I know what I'm thinking before I play it. And oh, it's worse than I thought. Oh, well, this is still what I wrote down ahead of time. Like you see a lot of that, by the way, with tech tubers when they respond to like announcements. Like sometimes things are 10, 20% better or worse than expected, but they just wrote something ahead of time and they're like, well, it's still bad.
This is what we're giving you.
Yeah. But outside of that, the Game Awards, I guess we talked about the game advice part of this question from Dead of Night more than I planned to, but probably good because I don't have much to say about the Game Awards except they were horrible.
I mean, I didn't watch them and I thought maybe I would go and like look through them afterwards, but then from everyone I heard about the Game Awards, it was 3.5 hours of ads and not like E3 like it's hours of ads. Like literally, it's just random ads that they threw in because they bought too many ads or they sold too many ads or something.
Yeah, and it was a horrible, horrible affair that makes gaming look just completely idiotic and like it's all pay to win in terms of who wins awards and what gets what. It was bad. It was very, very. I mean, I've seen some people try to hedge. Oh, I want to be nice about this. It was bad. It was like very bad.
Well, to be fair, the other award shows for like other media are pretty much just bought at this point too, especially like the Golden Globes.
The Golden Globes, yeah.
The celebrities just like openly joke that they buy
awards.
They buy awards for the Golden Globes at this point. So to be fair, I think every awards show has this issue. It's just a bit less hidden with the Game Awards for some reason.
And more on display flagrantly. That's
true.
How I would. I mean, I don't know what else there is really to say. It was, Jeff Keighley, he freaking hyped it up. He said we're going to have, like, I forgot what he compared it to, like a dozen announcements comparable to like these bombshell reveals. And there was nothing interesting, in my opinion, really. Nothing. Nothing. There was no, like, I don't know, Starfield gameplay or Elder Scrolls trailer or Metal Gear Solid remake announcement. There was nothing.
Well, to be fair, to the Elder Scrolls, that game's probably not going out until 2027. So,
well, they need to re-release Skyrim 5 more times before they can release a new Elder Scrolls game.
Have we gotten a PS5 VR remaster of Skyrim yet, Tom? I think that's what we need next.
I honestly don't remember. Maybe
there's going to be a PSVR 2.
Oh, you're right. There probably will be. All right, let us get into corrections and omissions. 3080 Ti buyer man writes in. And he says, hardly a correction or omission, but more answering a previous reader mail that had some confusion around it. In Broken Silicon 130, the question of using ray tracing hardware for sound was brought up, and while it certainly might be possible, it's not a necessity. Games already use ray casting to calculate acoustics. Well, I can't give you a list of what games do it. You don't need to. There's a ton of them. And which don't. Here's an article of Platinum Games themselves on the way they did it in Nier Automata. It works well because of the sound you need to make casts very few, in quotes, rays. This article, they say they calculate 8 rays per frame, which even a lowly PS4 can manage to do at 60 frames per second.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and that's worth pointing out. Ray tracing's been doable on, I mean, technically everything, practically, if you really think about it. But certainly there were ray tracing demos on the PS3. They never really used it in a PS3 game. But, like, it's all just a matter of how many you need to do. That's what Turing brought to the table is, even if it really wasn't enough, I think, it's like now we're talking about millions instead of like a dozen.
Yeah, and it does make me wonder how, if there would be any improvement to the sound if they increase the amount of quote unquote rays cast per, like if they scale that up to some bigger number, if that would really even do anything beneficial to the game, or if it would just, add more computing power for no reason, like tessellating under the ocean or something.
Yeah, and Crysis too. Yeah. All right, well, let us get into, I guess, what I've almost organized like stories. So the way this is done is I've organized this into quarters with the exception of one, which was organized into just 1 month because of how many leaks were in that one. This is a look back at 2021, kind of giving final thoughts on what happened earlier in the year and how we think it developed by now. Quarter 1, I titled, Gamers Become Disillusioned While Tom Moves to Nashville, because that's really what I remember is just this precipitous drop-off in interest in the beginning of 2020, like just palpable drop-offs. You
mean 21?
In the beginning of 2021, yeah. My mistake. Because I remember those first podcasts we were doing, like we had on NX Gamer again, was I think the most popular guest we've ever had on. I don't even remember. I think possibly his episode in 2020 got up to like 80,000 listens and like another 10 on the, like it got to like almost 100,000 downloads for that podcast episode. And this one, if I remember correctly, got to like 30 something. And that was with a big guest. There were episodes where the interest was just way, way, way lower in quarter one. And you saw it across videos too, despite there being some pretty interesting stuff. And it's just because I don't even just think it was disillusionment so much as people were just tired. They had been following hardware news closely for half a year. But I don't, out of all of these stories here, before I start reading through a few of them, just to at least give them some mention, like which ones point out to you the most as something worth remembering or talking about, or even things you've just forgot happened already?
You know, it's a little funny. I don't have too much to say about it because laptop stuff always gets less coverage just because DIY hardware people can't DIY laptops. But I had like almost completely forgotten about the Cezanne launch, honestly.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Cezanne was even when it came out, I don't feel like there was, I don't know. It's hard for me to say because Renoir was obviously a bigger jump from the previous one.
And I think Renoir was already most of the way there for like what people were looking for in performance. Like Renoir was already a capable challenger to whatever Intel was putting on laptops. So Cezanne coming out and then just dunking on Intel, it doesn't have as big of an effect as, Renoir already getting to what people want in laptops. Like, because I see a lot of Renoir laptops now.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
or Lucian, I guess some of them, which is basically rebranded Renoir. Because when Renoir came out, it made Intel's efficiency look horrible, I guess is what I will say. And their integrated graphics obviously were like light years ahead of the 14 nanometer crap Intel had, and certainly competitive with Ice Lake's integrated graphics as well. Cezanne just basically added Zen 3 and a couple of other things to Renoir.
Mm-hmm.
But, that addition, it really made the whole efficiency argument of Intel just gone. I mean, and it came out at a time where Tiger Lake was kind of a little too late to be that interesting because it launched with 4 cores first. It had better graphics than Ice Lake, but they really weren't much better than Cezanne. And Cezanne just comes out and it's just like, oh my God, I cannot believe the efficiency advantage AMD has now in laptop. That's the one thing worth pointing out is I just remember like all these reviews, like specifically from like Tim at Hardware Unboxed that were just like, this is like low-end Cezanne's beating the top Intel half the time with just 6 cores versus 8 Intel cores, simply because the Intel ones throttle so much more.
Yeah, and like if Tiger Lake H had been around earlier than it was, I think it would have been a more interesting conversation. But the fact that Tiger Lake came out and it was good, but it just wasn't 8 cores.
Exactly. Tiger Lake was a good option by itself in laptops that were just thin enough that you couldn't quite put in an MX card like you can with like the NV13. There weren't that many of them around, though, is the problem. And even then, it's like you can disable Cezanne and make it like a 10 watt or 15 watt Cezanne chip. Honestly, with 8 full cores, actually, that's like 80% of the graphics performance. It just... And, I remember my old leaks. Tiger Lake was supposed to come out at the end of 2019 to my memory or something, or they were trying to get it out that soon. It just didn't. And, I don't want to get into it too much because it's more of the second quarter, but this was really the start of the all-time low in Intel optimism as well, I'd say.
That or Comet Lake probably, or is where it really started, I think.
Rocket Lake was rock bottom. We don't need to get ahead of ourselves for sure.
Yeah. But I would say it was one of those two. I'm not. I think it was probably Comet Lake before that, where it was just like the same shit again, kind of. Mm-hmm. But
especially because like before, if you think of Coffee Lake, they added two more cores. First with Coffee Lake, the 8700K, and they added 2 cores again with Coffee Lake with the 9900K. At least back then, Intel was catching up to AMD core count 8 versus 8. Or 6 cores at near 5 gigahertz versus 8 AMD cores from Zen 1 that were substantially weaker. The problem with Comet Lake was it was like, now we have 2 more cores again. And they're like, yeah, AMD has 16. No one cares.
Yeah.
But that is for a different year, though. Moving forward, looking back at these leaks here, there's the Ampere, of course, not leaks, but launch. That was a big talk back then as well, is Ampere efficiency, and just how clear it was becoming that Ampere's efficiency was all over the place and really hurting their ability to make new laptops feel that special. Like, I remember I got a 2060 Max-Q laptop near the end of 2020. And I was like, it was a good deal. And I got like a company discount from one of the previous companies I worked at as well still. So totally worth it, and I still use it to this day. It's fantastic. But I was always thinking, man, I don't know, though. Those new Ampere ones are coming out, and they did. It's like, yeah, it's like 20% more efficient. And frankly, we'll get into this later, I believe. But if you look at Ampere, Nvidia really oversold the laptops you're going to get these in anyways. Like, they talked about the 3060 being like 20%, maybe 30% better, but it's really not, because they only put it in laptops above $1,000 that previously had 2070 laptops in, which are basically the same anyways. And all the sub $1,000 laptops now, most of them at least, that are Nvidia, seem to have 3050 Ti's. It's just a 4 gigabyte 2060, basically. Not even 2060, 4 gigabyte 1660.
Well, I mean, it is all taking place in the global chip shortage, and that's going to affect laptop prices. But yeah, mostly because these companies can sell things at whatever price they want to, really. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I would say Ampere in laptops was just overall one of the most disorganized launches I've ever seen of their stuff. Like, they had gone for, maybe it was only one generation, maybe two, where they had actually, I thought, intelligently named all of their graphics cards. And, over AMD, who still was doing, I would say, annoying practices where they call two different cards the same thing, and except one goes into a laptop. It just makes the lineup confusing.
At least AMD puts an M at the end of the name, though.
That's true. And then Nvidia went back to doing that again too, and then they removed like all branding and just called them the laptop edition.
Right,
and
which can mean anything from,
could be like use anything from 25 to 75 watts and have huge variance in performance.
Yeah, well, because like the 3080 can go all the way down to 80 watts in the Max-Q power configuration. And it's like, that's not going to really perform any better than an 80 watt 3070, like that has 20% less cores. Like, it's literally going to be like within a couple percent of performance. In fact, it's all going to come down to laptop cooling at that point and what differentiates it.
Yeah, and you just get this confusing thing where, depending on what configuration of the graphics card you have, a 3070, I think, could have potentially been stronger than a 3080 laptop edition, just because of how it's configured, and there's no branding or anything that really tells you, because they're all 3080 laptop editions. Now you have to go in and make sure you're getting the correct configuration of the thing you want, which it's probably kind of evident most of the time based on like the size of the laptop, but it's still an extra added step of stupidity that just makes buying things pointlessly harder.
Yeah, I guess moving forward then, on this note of like confusing NVIDIA segmentation, this was the quarter that the RTX 3060 came out. Actually, that was one of the most popular videos I put out this year. I don't know how it got up to, like 120, 130, I think maybe 110,000 views or something. And that was just highlighting how awkward and ridiculous the 3060 was. It was clearly always going to be, actually, I guess, how do I put it? It was clearly going to be some 6 gigabyte model, I think, with a cut down 6 gigabyte 3050 Ti. In fact, if you look at old, and I've talked to Ycry at Video Cards about this, he's like, no, I've seen the old marketing material. That is true. They were literally going to call basically what GA 106 is. They're going to give it 6 gigabytes, or the version that they put in the 3060 that's partially cut down. They were probably going to give it 6 gigabytes and call it a 3050 Ti on desktop. They just never were able to do that. And then they thought, and again, this is funny, and there are links in the description. Go look at 3060 reviews, everybody, where it's quite quaint. You see so many people, whether it's Hardware Unboxed or others, going, Well, the 6700 XT is coming with 12 gigabytes. So we know that's probably going to be 400, and a cut down model will probably be 350. So they have to make this 12 gigabytes. And none of that ever even happened.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, I just remember everything online being thrown into question by the 3060, because if that's where they're placing their weakest card in their lineup at that point with 12 gigabytes of RAM, which is more than every other card in the lineup aside from the 3090, that like signals that maybe they're going to cancel and relaunch all of their upper end cards.
Which there were lots of rumors back then that might happen.
Yeah, and like it makes intuitive sense, even if there wasn't any like specific leak I can think of right now that said that they were doing that. I'm sure there was some in a lab somewhere, but it just made Nvidia's lineup insanely confusing this year. The 3060 specifically.
Well, and the most annoying thing I had also about this 3060 launch, and shortly after that, the 6700 XT 12 gigabyte launched, was the bizarre double standard I kept seeing in reviews for, or completely missing the point. Which the 6600 XT we'll get to later was the biggest example that's just completely missing the point of what's going on with pricing manipulation by reviewers, where you have people giving the 3060 okay scores because, hey, at least it's 12 gigabytes for $340 or $330, whatever it was. Never mind the fact that it never, ever was that price to this day. And I talked to distributors and they're like, no, literally, before we even sell it to you, we can't get them for less than like $450 because of that RAM. It's expensive. And then they just look at the 6700 XT and go, well, that MSRP is a little too high. And it's like, yeah, but at least it launched closer to it than the 3060. That has never been a sub $400 card, ever. And it's funny because outside of token releases, so they can claim it is. And it's funny, Tech Power Up Wizard there actually did note that, like literally in their review, they called it like a $450 card.
Which I would say by this 3060 launch is definitely, I think, when you should have started catching when like MSRPs are fake, and we should probably highlight this in every review that with graphics card, every review needs to highlight that the MSRP almost doesn't matter at this point. Like, I'm trying to remember the card. Was it the 6600 XT specifically?
That actually had an MSRP.
Yeah. And, I believe it was Hardware Unbox actually did a street price performance versus MSRP price performance to like highlight that, you know, MSRP doesn't really exist at this point. So
if you look at the street price, I remember him saying, well, this is the best bargain you've ever seen.
Yeah, because like the 3060 is not a $330 card and people need to stop thinking it is.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I guess continuing this discussion, this was also when NVIDIA launched the CMP series, and that I got really animated and mad when I saw some of the takes to that, because you saw so many people just going, good, NVIDIA's making mining cards. This will help gamers. And I'm like, dude, look at the specs. They're literally using the dies for that could have been like 3080s. It doesn't matter if it's only for miners. The best thing you can do to help with supply, if you think mining is the problem, even though it's really not the problem, it's part of the problem, but it's not the problem, is you just make as many gaming cards as possible and hope gamers get them and try to get them. What NVIDIA does with a CMP series is make 100% sure now 10, 20% of their production will never go to gamers. Now you're sure it's never happening.
Yeah, and all those gaming cards that miners are buying, they're still buying those because even if they have the what was the branding? Was it LHR? Was that what they called it?
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah, they of course cracked that because these are all. I mean, a lot of these firms have like computer engineers working for them, and they're going to crack these things because this is how they make money. And I guess assuming if they could have locked down all of their gaming cards and could not be hacked by crypto mining firms, and they had then siloed off like 20% of their supply, 10 or 20% of their supply. I don't know what percent of what they're selling goes to miners at this point. and then that's how it would have worked. Like, just confirmed we're putting 20% of our stuff to miners. Maybe that would have been better for gamers, but I don't think that reality is even possible, frankly.
Anyone who even thinks this will help at all, right, is someone who fundamentally doesn't understand why mining exists the way it does on something like Ethereum. They literally want it to mine on graphics cards. They want it to because it decentralizes the computing power. And a lot of people have graphics cards. And they feel like if they do graphics cards, that's something they can sustainably keep updating on their blockchain to be doable, right?
Yeah.
Whereas with CPU type algorithms, you're just going to get an ASIC pretty quick that not everyone can get as easily as a graphics card, right? So that's the idea behind it. They will just update their blockchain because remember, it's really centrally controlled and they can do whatever they want with your money at Ethereum. They can, and they have multiple times, by the way, they can just change the code to run better on graphics cards whenever they want. Never mind the fact that there will probably always be ways to get these cards to run it well. By the way, Dan, this is later down in the wrap up. EVJ just released a firmware themselves that makes their LHR cards better at mining.
Cool.
All of this, the CMP series, the LHR series, all of this bullshit this year from Nvidia was a way for them to jack up prices for miners and limit how many cards will flood the market on eBay when it crashes again. That is all this is about. Control, extra profits. It is certainly not about helping gamers at all. It hurts gamers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that was definitely something to discuss. The only other thing I would say here is I have a link here is, it's funny. I didn't even remember it was that early. As early as January, we had early Lovelace specs coming out. Now, I still can't to this day confirm the validity of this. Typically the type of information I get, at least when it comes to things pertaining to AMD and Nvidia, is more big picture targets and features followed by really concrete stuff before launch. That's why I typically launch the pricing of cards before everyone this whole year. And I typically know the exact segmentation before everyone, but I don't know the middle stuff like specs. I just know the idea and the performance target. It's funny, all the way back in January, Copilot was talking about, I think, what is it, like around 18,000 CUDA cores?
Yes, something like that, I believe.
So,
I mean, I don't have too much to say about Lovelace. It's still pretty far out. Like, wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't till next year still. So, or
till
2023, I should say. God, yeah, I'm already thinking in 2022.
Now, what's funny though is I didn't notice this until now. If you look at the link in the description to this tweet from Copite talking about Lovelace's structures. He replied, like, what is that? March, April, May. Yeah. So like 5 months later, exactly almost actually, now they look at it. 5 months after tweeting this, which was technically the very end of 2020, by the way, but this is when a lot of news sites picked it up like us. He replies in May that for Gaming Tech and these other people saying 2.5x performance make absolutely no sense. So this was all the way back then where he basically starts asking people, stop fucking quoting my specs as meaning 2.5x performance. I have an idea of the specs. The specs do not one-to-one translate to performance. I didn't even notice that until now. That's hilarious.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not like we're looking at that tweet every day.
Yeah. Want some? All right. You can keep having holiday cookies if you want, but keep in mind, you're probably going to want something healthier in about a month. That's right. Today's piece of content is sponsored by Vite Ramen. Whether you're looking for something easy to make on your lunch break from home during December, or something that also checks all of your healthy boxes when you try to work off that holiday weight in January, Vite Ramen has you covered. It's made in America by Americans with healthy ingredients. And if you go to the link in the description or on screen and use the code BROKENSILICON, you will get 10% off your offer. I mean, it really doesn't matter what you're looking for in an easy-to-make meal. Vite Ramen takes less than 5 minutes. It tastes great, and it's not bad for you. That's why I actually do myself eat it regularly, and why I recommend you do as well. Again, use the link in the description or on screen, and use the offer code BrokenSilicon. This does legitimately help the channel a lot, and it also helps you save some time and eat healthy. Buy Vite Ramen today. I don't know. So that does lead into quarter two. So quarter two, let us start with that here. Intel enthusiasm hits an all-time low before XC pictures leak. And that's how I would put it. And there was even some of this in quarter one where we which we skipped over, where we had like more Alder Lake stuff leaking. In quarter one, actually, I'll say that is when I became confident Alder Lake was going to be more competitive than almost anyone was realizing. Of course, I pretty much thought that since 2019, but that's when I got really firm stuff. Like, oh no, this thing really is like a doubling of performance and efficiency over Rocket Lake, which before Rocket Lake even came out, I knew it was going to be a disaster. But Rocket Lake did come out in quarter two, and it was a disaster. I mean, literally, of Hardware Unboxed review just says not a great flagship. Like,
and Gamers Nexus frequently refers to Rocket Lake as a waste of sand, which I think that's a good characterization of it. It's had fewer cores, I think slightly better single threading performance, worse multi-threading because once again it has 2 fewer cores. It was a complete waste of a series. I guess there was like some tiny claim that it's in some stuff it might have beaten AMD still in gaming, but
it really didn't, though. And the average here shows the i9 losing to the 5800X.
Yeah, so there were probably some single-threaded things that it did slightly better in, and I'm sure user benchmark figured out a way to recommend the 11900K as the best, or probably the 11700K as the best thing to get of all time. But yeah, especially at the top end, Rocket Lake was a complete embarrassment. I guess once you're getting to like the i5 territory, there were some really budget ones that might have been worth getting, but I think really the Rocket Lake
i5 was okay if you got it for less than 200 or like around 200. It's like, okay, well, you're on a dead socket, unlike Zen 3, which will get Zen 3D. I guess we didn't know that back then, though. Although there were rumors about some successor to Zen 3 actually back then, whether it was Zen 3 or not. So yeah, you're on a dead socket for Rocket Lake, but and it has an inferior platform, but it did have PCIe 4.0. And if you get it for less than 200, it's pretty close to a 5800X or a 5600X, I should say, not even 5600X. So that makes sense. But outside of that, it was all shit. I mean, it's so bad. To go back to what Gamers Nexus said about it being a waste of sand. I mean, it took up more die space than Comet Lake's 10 core. So
yeah, that's nuts.
So that's, and I talked to an Intel contact about this, who told me that actually they thought Rocket Lake turned out better than their worst projections for performance, which is crazy. It was all practicing building architectures between nodes and learning what to do better next time. And they've learned, they said. They learned, so they're excited about that. But like, there's no way around it. They should have just made Comet Lake have PCIe 4.0 and come out later or something. Like what they ended up doing makes absolutely... You can't tell me they couldn't have tried to put some version of the integrated graphics that Rocket Lake had with the architecture from Comet Lake and try to give it PCIe 4.0. This is 100% possible. And that's what and maybe even tried to give it 12 cores. There are ring bus CPUs Intel's done with 12 cores. They could have done 12. This doesn't make any sense.
Once again, I don't know what it would be if they had that doesn't make sense though, because the only thing I can think is for some reason they had to release this.
That is what it was. The Cypress Cove, leaked first by Moore's Law is dead, had to come out. I mean, that's what it was. They had done the work. They had made it. They were even considering launching it to laptop, but they did cancel that version of it because Tiger Lake turned out better than expected simultaneously, while Rocket Lake just seemed like a complete waste of space. You almost do wonder, too, why they didn't put Tiger Lake on desktop. But again, it's all coulda, shoulda, woulda. They had done it. They had done the work. It was better than the worst case. It wasn't the best case. And it used 14 nanometer, so they could use their 14 nanometer lines while they made 10 nanometer Tiger Lake. That's why they did it. And it was very bad. You go into similar discussions of like what we had about Bulldozer. Like, what if AMD made a Phenom 3 on 32 nanometer instead of Bulldozer? What if Intel had a 12 core or even just 10 core Comet Lake with PCIe 4.0 support? I don't know. But that's not what they put all the money into, and that product wasn't ready, so they had to launch this. Anyways, though, moving forward, there was also the leak about Van Gogh, which turned out correct. Let's take a second to talk about that now. Why not? Why not? Let's talk about Van Gogh and the Steam Deck now, because I actually learned a little more information about Van Gogh before recording this. Not enough for me to do a leak because it's like, what am I really leaking? But I can't say half of it. But Van Gogh supposedly it definitely was supposed to come out before it did. That's what I'll say. And I remember Van Gogh, when I first leaked it in Q2, being really interesting. At the time, though, I had already heard of it the previous year in 2020. And I already done Van Gogh leaks, or leaks that mentioned it. I was really, when I did the Van Gogh leak, like, I was honestly digging on it to figure out if it was ever going to frickin' come out. And what I concluded in that leak, I believe, is maybe not, because the products it was supposed to be in never used it. Right.
Yeah. And it does happen sometimes. Lakefield, which did come to some products, I guess, but Lakefield was a big story, and then half the stuff that it was supposed to be in was canceled.
Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if it was just supposed to be in Surface. I think they were definitely hoping it would be. It was kind of meant for that, and Chromebooks and stuff like that. I guess it just never happened, and Valve swooped it up. Now, what I don't know from talking to a few sources is if it was always aimed at something like the Steam Deck. My impression continues to be that they thought that would be a good use as handheld gaming Windows devices, but that it never was meant for some big product. And then Valve came in and used a new code name, apparently. I had that confirmed today, just to be clear. I mean, we all know, when the Steam Deck was announced, the exact specs I said Van Gogh had. I guess they call it Aerith now. No. And what I asked is sure why they changed the code name to Aerith for the Steam Deck version, but it is literally the same silicon, just so everyone knows listening to this. All I can say is I was more excited about it when I first heard about the Steam Deck, when I thought the prospects of it launching late summer. But now that we know it's really not coming out until early 2022, a product that was supposed to come out at the end of 2020, there's just a part of me that goes, this just isn't that interesting to me anymore. It's launching next to Rembrandt, mobile Alder Lake. I'm not sure, mobile Alder Lake will be pretty close to this probably.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to game fine, I guess, at 600p. That's the most you can say about it. It's a cool concept, but, Valve is saying they want other people to make their own Steam Decks, and I won't be surprised if another company comes out and makes something better than the Steam Deck.
Again, I think my problem with the Steam Deck continues to be that I feel like it needs to have two versions that cater very directly to two different types of mobile gamers. I know it runs at 1.5 teraflops max, but it's also going to throttle. This should have been allowed in a top version, in my opinion, to run at 2 gigahertz at more 2 teraflops. Get it up there. Let it really boost up there and just charge more money with better cooling, make it a bit heavier, because either this is meant to be able to run all AAA games or it's not. And if you're going to tell me it's for indie games, well, my phone does that. What you need to do then is, I think, have a disabled 4CU version or something else, frankly, really probably Cezanne based or something version that's $300 in the size of a Vita or something, so that I can put it in an actual pocket, because the Steam Deck doesn't fit in my pocket. It doesn't play the latest AAA games well enough in 720p, so it's in this no man's land. I really think there should be this polarized Vita-sized or PSP ideally, or 3DS-sized thing that I can put in a pocket and play all my indie games, or it needs to be a little stronger so that it's actually doing what it claims to do.
Yeah, because at a certain point, the Steam Deck is just another laptop, honestly. That's what it gets to at a certain point.
And that's how I think of the Switch as well, right? If it was smaller, I wouldn't think of it that way. But I'm sorry, there's nothing the Switch and this Steam Deck especially are not going in your pocket. So it's a laptop then. I have to put it in a backpack. It's a laptop. It's as portable as a laptop then.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess if you're on the train though, you can still hold it and game on it. Well, kind of. The problem is a lot of the games I play on PC, I like playing at high frame rates or in multiplayer like Battlefield or something. I'm not playing this competitively. It was already hard for me to compete on my laptop last night. No, I'm not, it's not fun. I stopped kind of playing, I remember on our netbooks, Battlefield games, just because it stopped being fun. Even if I could play them online, I would just do so much worse that it lost the fun to me.
Yeah. And, with the Steam Deck, to a certain extent, I wonder if it's just going to be like an indie machine, because
then it should be cheaper and lighter. I just don't want, again, people buying into it thinking they're going to be playing Halo Infinite on the go. It's like, really? You're going to play Halo Infinite online using a control scheme that's worse than using a PS5 or Xbox controller on PC in a low resolution? You're going to lose games, man.
Yeah.
But moving forward with stuff from Q2, there was also this video that for some reason went under the radar or didn't get enough quoting, I don't think. This was also kind of at the all-time low in enthusiasm. But I did the Zen 3 Plus Warhol and Ryzen 4700S being an Xbox debunking.
Leaks are always in this weird space with text, because there's like some people that just think every leak is wrong always, and then some people that, I don't know, just follow them and talk about every single leak as if it's real, or as if it's going to come to fruition, because I don't want to imply that any leak that doesn't come to fruition wasn't quote unquote real, because a lot of them are.
Sure.
But like, if there's like some bullshit leak that's getting spread around a lot,
and Warhol was one of them.
It would serve the community well to like highlight that there's clearly problems with this leak. You know what I mean?
Well, and I'll say it, I don't know why anyone follows Red Gaming Tech, who perpetuated this for months. I put out a video debunking it, and the next week he says it was canceled. Why is anyone quoting this guy?
I don't know, Tom.
Like, Jesus Christ. That's when I got really mad with this video, because I was like, I was mad because I saw the hedging happening at the places that were spreading this leak. And I went, dude, this never left the planning stages. I talked to someone at AMD. So you guys are just so wrong that it was going to come out and just canceled. It was canceled last year. And I can't believe I never looked into this sooner. And it was funny because one of my best sources, too, who's not at AMD, but more connected to people at various companies, I asked him about it, and he responded in an hour, shit, a lot of the people I'm asking don't know what I'm talking about. I always just assumed this was real. Tom, I think you're onto something. And it's just so bad. I don't know.
Yeah.
Same with the Xbox thing. That one didn't even really make sense. Like, why would it be 16 gigabytes on PC? This Xbox is segmented memory. It's probably a PS5 die or something entirely different.
Yeah. I don't even know what else to say about the 4700S. Yeah.
Which now it sounds like that might be coming out, but yeah, I don't know. Again, I just bring that up, not trying to, it was an important moment in kind of how we handle our content that I just don't think is covered enough. But anyways, also something that I almost got wrong too, though, to be fair to myself, I'm not perfect, is FSR. Now, I never went insane. I never went around doing videos. FSR is never coming out. But all the way up until late Q1, I was saying, I don't know exactly when, but I don't have concrete information that FSR is launching anytime soon. When I first started to hear rumors of FSR, I was like, nah. But then I asked sources, and they're like, yep, I guess it's coming in a month. And it was very clear that AMD wanted it to look like it wasn't coming anytime soon. I mean, really, FSR stands out to me because we don't talk about it anymore. And that popped up and launched in a month of hearing it was actually coming.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't know why or maybe AMD just was tight-lipped about it, or was extra not leaky for some reason because they thought this was going to be a really good story. And, FSR was a really good story for them. I'm not remembering. It came out right after the 3080 Ti, right?
Right. I think it was announced before and launched after the announcement of the 3080 Ti.
Okay.
And the 3080 Ti seemingly was announced right next to it on purpose.
Yeah, because there was. I guess I am actually not sure which story deflated which more, but like I think AMD just putting out a software fix, a software solution to like effectively make their cards stronger. It's like, oh, so you have a new graphics card coming out. Well, our graphics cards are now a 3080. Our old graphics card now beats a 3080 Ti when it wouldn't have before. And I think the big thing that FSR still needs to prove is like how widely adopted is it going to be.
Let's talk about FSR much more right now. Then I don't think we have much to say about the 3080 Ti, right? I mean, what is there to say? We've kind of already talked about how dumb LHR is. We don't need to get into that. Let's take this part of the Q2 section to talk about, is FSR enough yet? Because, well, you answer first. What do you think?
I don't think it quite is. The reviews that came out about it, I think it has a lot of potential as if it, once again, if it's in even half of games or something at some point, that would be great, but it's just not there yet.
That's exactly right. When FSR came out, I saw it as a game changer, and I think eventually it will be, but I thought it would have more game changiness to it by now. I think it's going to be essential to RDNA 3's launch from what I've heard. I think it's going to get massive adoption next year, but I'm kind of blown away that it doesn't have it yet now. You know, we play Battlefield 2042. I have a 3070. You have a 6700 XT. I use DLSS, and you've seen it. It works great in that game.
Yeah, and DLSS is actually to a point where I think it's a real feature that's in a lot of games now, and it works, generally speaking, pretty well. So FSR needs to show that it can outcompete in the volume of games if it's technically still somewhat lower quality of a technology. Like the fidelity of your images is worse with FSR, and it's like quantifiably worse most of the time. Where with DLSS, it's at the point where there's some artifacts, but they're pretty hard to detect unless you're like actually really actively looking for them now.
I'd say FSR to this day is still more of a nice boost in 1440p to 4K, whereas if you're in 4K, like it just allows my 3070 to pretty much game in 4K in more games than it should. Like I in Battlefield play around, you've seen 4K 100. It's a mix of medium through ultra settings, mostly high and ultra actually, and DLSS balanced. I get around 4K 100. If I did not have it, I couldn't, and it helps the 2060 I have a lot, and I don't notice any problems with it unless you go to the lowest levels. Honestly, even Battlefield, even on the lowest levels, works better than you think it would. And I play Metro Exodus Enhanced. It looks great in that, and it looks terrible in the performance mode in that one, though. I will say it's comical how bad it is sometimes, just weird shapes in the distance. But you know, there's no FSR in that game. There's no FSR in Battlefield right now, to my knowledge. I don't believe so. There's no FSR in a lot of games we've been playing. And I bet Dan, as an AMD gamer, is it feeling a little annoying?
Yeah.
And we have to give credit where credit's due. We shit on DLSS for 2 years because it was the worst thing I'd ever seen for 2 years. But we've got to admit it's a thing now.
Well, because it's a real feature now that I think Nvidia is perfectly justified in advertising. But like for a while, it was like, oh, the blur filter that I can turn on that boosts frame rate, I guess. Yeah, great. It makes my game look blurry. That's what DLSS was for a while. And it's certainly not that anymore.
No, and they just released DLSS 2.3, which fixed a lot of the ghosting issues in games to the point where I think Tim at Hardware Unboxed says that as long as you enable the 2.3 version of DLSS, which is interesting, Dan, you can actually just literally drop the file for
yeah, I know.
And it works. It actually does work. He says at this point, there's pretty much no game we would say don't use DLSS, actually, if you use 2.3 that they've tested, which is a huge boon. And after FSR's out, I feel like actually DLSS has never had a greater advantage than after FSR's launch.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And, what was the big game that they, like all of the not DLS, FSR reviews had day one? Godfall.
Who gives a
game
shit?
Notoriously, everyone thinks is terrible.
The game that no one, I'm sure someone's going to say don't turn it off. All right. We don't hate you. I've never played it, but my God, it's like, this always does annoy me too when you have these as ashes of the benchmark. It's just like, great. I know another ashes of the singularity benchmark. Actually, most people are playing Call of Duty, Battlefield, Fortnite, and Grand Theft Auto 5, and that's why we benchmark those games.
Like when I got my PS5, I got Demon Souls from GameStop, and the employee there was joking to me about how many people had already returned Godfall. And
really?
I got the PS5 like 2 weeks after it came out, I believe.
What was the joke? How did that even come up in the conversation?
Oh, I saw that Demon Souls was used, and I was like, is Demon Souls, is there a used copy I can get? If there is, I'll get that. And then he said, no, we've got some Godfalls, though.
Oh, you just asked, and he was like, yeah, I mean, I guess. Yeah, actually, I have a funny story about that, too. So when I got the PlayStation 5, of course, once I had secured my pre-order, that's when I pre-ordered Demon Souls, the Best Buy. Back then I lived. This was, of course, late 2020, not 2021. So I was still in Peoria back then. And they were like, all right, here's how it works. There's COVID procedures. So you're going to show up at the front door. And I went there on launch day. There were 2 other cars there of people just hoping they had extra ones. They didn't. And I was like, so I went up to the sliding doors that were closed. I'm like, what do I do? And a guy walks up and goes, can I help you? I'm like, yeah, I have a scheduled pickup today. Oh, what's your order? Okay. And then he goes and gets to the PS5 and hands it to me. He goes, all right, thanks. And then I looked in the back. I'm like, I also had Demon Souls. And he just walks up to the rack and grabs a copy and hands it to me. He says, all right, bye. He didn't check anything. I could have just said, I got this too. That's my funny story. But it's funny enough that I have to tell it if it's somehow tangentially related to what we're talking about. But okay, and then what else was there in this quarter? Oh, first pictures of XE. I remember that. So late quarter 1 through early quarter 2 was the rock bottom of Intel hope. And by the end of quarter 2, people were starting to get really excited after. This was when a lot of people were saying XE wasn't coming out. And yeah, I think Usual Suspect back then was saying that it's not coming to desktop. It's only coming to laptop this year. And then I just posted pictures like, shut up and people stop listening to this guy. Here's pictures of the desktop card. It's coming out.
I mean, yeah, there's just been rumors and leaks about Intel getting into the GPU market for years now. And DG1, it was like, there was an actual discrete card. So people are like, okay, it's probably happening.
Yeah, this one?
Yeah, I know.
Holding it up.
But with the knowledge of the existence of DG1, by that point, I was like, okay, they're definitely going to be launching a discrete graphics card sometime in the near future.
Are you sure? Do you remember I'm not second guessing you. I'm just like, are you sure when DG1?
That's when I started getting confident in it, I would say.
And you stayed that way because there were a lot of people, even on, and for my leaks, half of my sources really until mid 2021 still didn't think they were going to do anything besides DG1 with DG2. I don't know that I have much else to say about that. The final thing to get to from this quarter, well, kind of, you'll see for the next story, everybody, is Zen 4 Raphael leaks. Insane IPC, executable fix, corroborates a lot of the information. Like he had some stuff I didn't have. He had pictures and I know it's renders, but yeah, just like my ARC renders were renders. They're real. He knows what Zen 4 is going to look like, the socket. Like this is, end of May when we just had tons of Zen 4 Raphael stuff come out. An interesting thing to look at is, though, from this leak, I remember still not quite being sure of core count. I'll be honest with you guys, now that enough time's passed, some of my information came from Intel people. The same people that were sure Zen 4 would go up to 128 cores. But you got to remember that Intel doesn't know the full picture. And so they were talking about 24-core Raphael. And honestly, a lot of that just seems to be them knowing AMD has prototypes for some 24 core on AM4 and 32 cores right now. but they don't know what it is. To me, this suggests AMD has always been considering possibly doing either 16 Zen 4C plus 16 Zen 4C or 8 plus 16 in some SKU for it. They just still don't know if they're going to do it. And what Intel doesn't know is it's not Raphael. Raphael goes up to 16 cores.
Yeah.
And, I wasn't sure back then, but now I am, guys.
I mean, I don't really have too much to add to it. Like, at the end of the day, then this all becomes about IPC and clock speed. So we'll see what it looks like when it's closer to launch.
Yeah, and it's starting to sound more and more like it might have PCIe 5.0 as well. Which, again, back then, and a lot of their documentation showed 4.0. Some of it showed 5, but most of the stuff, like pictorial stuff, was like 4.0. Now we know that they may actually shift it to 5.0 to have content parity with Raptor Lake. Back then, it wasn't known. And I think, this was when... Let's go into June. I technically made this its own story because of how big of the leaks were in just June alone. Actually, a lot like 2020, by the way, if I remember correctly. 2020, I actually made this month its own kind of story. June just had an insane amount of leaks, and this is when it started to become clear that competition in 2022 is going to be absurd. This is when we got RDNA 3 performance estimates. And I got some Lovelace stuff. This is when we got iLeak 24-core Raptor Lake. This is when I did the Bergamo leak, like ending the 128-core Genoa debate. No, it's not Genoa. It's a different entire design. June was huge. I don't know, Dan. Let me ask you this. Raptor Lake, 24 cores, Bergamo, and RDNA 3 performance estimates. Of those three things that were leaked by me in June, which one felt like the biggest thing back then, and which one, and do you still feel like it's the biggest thing leaked from that month now?
I would say probably maybe 24-core Raptor Lake back then. I think in light of some testing, though, that we've talked about before by Hardware Unboxed, I think it casts a little bit of doubt on how useful 24-core Raptor Lake will be for gamers, unless, they start utilizing E-cores more effectively than they currently are, because as it stands, if you just have 8 cores, 16 threads, and 16 E-cores next year with Raptor Lake, assuming those E-cores remain as ineffective as they are in gaming, all you're really going to be looking for is the IPC increase of the P-cores. And I think Bergamo has potential to have huge implications with gamers, but that's yet to be seen, because I don't think they would start implementing that core design into consumer CPUs until like Zen 5 maybe or something.
And remember, I've leaked this. They could do it at the end of next year, I'm confident. They could bring out Zen 4C for consumers. I just don't know that they will.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say if they could or couldn't. I'm just...
You don't feel like...
I'm guessing, yeah.
Yeah, I think I would agree. In some ways, I think I still feel like Raptor Lake is the biggest one of the group, though. For me, just because I just still don't think we can overstate what it meant and what it still means now, even if we know way more. It means Intel isn't just doing Alder Lake, maybe narrowly beating Zen 3, and then losing by a mile next year. It means even if Zen 4 wins, they have something that's trying to keep up. And that this idea, and I said this is what I titled June, an insane amount of debt leaks drops pointing to heavy 2022 competition, not just 2023 and onwards. Like, it just shows that we don't need to guess, it's certainly up for debate who will win every year, but we don't need to worry about Intel sitting still, or really Nvidia or AMD either, any of the upcoming years. That no, from now on, it's pedal to the metal from all companies.
Yeah, and then to highlight that, the RDNA 3 performance stuff, I'm not remembering right now where you landed on where you think performance.
So this was before my bigger one, really being very confident about 3 and 4. We'll get to that in a second. This is actually when I analyzed what the doomsday scenario is. And I said the doomsday scenario is not 2.5x. It's not 3x RDNA 2 geniuses. It's probably around double. And
which around double would mean still arguably, depending on the way you think about it, doubling again would arguably be a bigger feat than doubling the 5700 XT like they did this year. So I mean,
they did it twice in a row. Yeah,
they did it twice in a row, and the 5700 XT is a mid-range die or Navi 11.
Yeah. Oh, it's absolutely a bigger feat if they manage to do it again. Especially, well, no, yeah, I guess it was still just like a node. It was the same node actually, RDNA 1 and RDNA 2. So it's not like we can say there was a node thing. But it is worth pointing out that if they manage to do this, it's obviously because they're using multiple chips, because 5 nanometer is not it's like 30% better than 7, guys. Or 40% better maybe. It is not like 7/16, which was like, I don't know, like 60% better or something. You know, this is like half of the increase that they got before. So if they double it, this is just, and you know, the part of that doomsday scenario though was, I was saying I'm not exactly sure of everything, but I am pretty sure that most people think Nvidia is going to lose the performance crown next year. And if they manage to do this, it would explain why they did. You know, Jensen doesn't like losing, but plans are made years ahead of time. So whatever Lovelace is pretty much set in stone. So all they can do is push a few things, twist a few knobs at this point. So if they lose, it's because they really didn't think AMD would do this again twice. And, you know, why would they? And I think a lot of people didn't think that AMD hadn't just Genoa, but also Bergamo coming in the same year. You know, this is when it became clear that, oh, God, how are we even going to keep track of everything, you know, next year?
Yeah.
Moving on then to Q3, looking back at some things. I have this here. It's funny. Tons of Threadripper products leaked before all being canceled in Q4.
And, you know, I think we've talked about that a lot already, but yeah, it is just funny. Like, also to highlight the what following leaks can look like sometimes, where it's just like, you know, getting excited about a new thing and then just all of it dropping off because there's no reason to launch Threadripper at this point.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out that even in that Threadripper leak, I was like, I don't know. It just seems like some of these aren't coming out. But what I'm telling you guys is they've at least laid the groundwork to do these products. You know, not just a Zen 3 Threadripper. They have the plans for a Milan X-based Threadripper. They have this all sitting there from roadmaps. It's just, will they actually do it? And we still don't know. And, you know, I've talked to a couple sources, including people at AMD, and they're like, you know, we'll see. You know, at the end of the day, if we want to launch a Zen 3 Threadripper, even if it feels like it's late to launch it, we can launch it. We just need like 2 months to get everything ready. Like, we'll launch it if we want to, if we think we need to for Sapphire Rapids. It's just right now we just don't think we need to.
Yeah.
And moving forward, there was the LHR series, which, I mean, I don't even know what to say about this anymore. Complete BS, market manipulation. Like, it cracked almost not immediately, like I thought it would take longer, and it did, but still a little quicker, honestly, than I expected. It's a complete joke. And then also from Q3, you know, this was a big one. The Nintendo Switch 2. I guess that's something worth covering a little bit from Q3. Just how many Switch Pro rumors there were that turned out to be completely misunderstood and bullshit at the same time. Then I just drop one after everyone says it's debunked. That was interesting.
Yeah, and you know, the Switch 2 is going to be coming out based on everything we know about manufacturing. Like, they kind of need to launch it, and it does sound like what do they even call it? The OLED Switch sounds like it was just a way to maintain that price while they go through their remaining stock. So, you know, they're going to have to launch a Switch 2 probably next year.
Exactly. Yeah, and it was this leak too. I mean, this one is one I did so much research on that came out in October. I remember this was, I believe, before I flew to that business trip for the Carolina Games Summit. I launched my 3060 Flood, and then I launched this video. This was a the Lovelace leak. That was, oh man, the Nintendo Switch leak was so much research, but I became more and more confident as I realized when you look at the numbers, like literally they're only buying up enough Switches exactly to make enough for 2 more years. And Nvidia literally has a new successor to Tegra coming out when I'm told this is coming. It's coming, guys. And it's funny how much people were like, I don't know if that's true. It's like this is one of those leaks where not only did I have some good information, but the more I dug into it, it had to be true.
Yeah.
And it still remains to be seen how good it is. It's clearly, in my opinion, based on some version of the Orin SoC. If not Orin, then it's a modification of it with Lovelace or something like that. It still remains to be seen, though, how strong that will be. And I just wouldn't. So many people are asking me to place bets on that, and it's like, oh no! I don't place bets on how Nintendo designs their products.
Yeah.
But moving forward, the 6600 XT launched, of course, and it was. I want to say it one more time. We've talked this to death. I don't have much to say. The 6600 XT was just a complete missing the point by half of the press, completely missing the point. I think I even saw some press say, well, we're not going to bow down to companies by saying it's a good product because it's actually at MSRP. And I'm like, well, okay, well, then you're just saying
you're just kind of advertising for another company at a certain point.
Exactly.
And by inadvertently taking this moral stand.
Yeah. The stand should be, what can you get? What's the best price performance? It's not in our control. Me, you, Gamers Nexus, these things are priced at. I have no control over this. At the end of the day, all we can do is give advice based on what the real world situation is. And that's something that I feel like by now most of the press has figured out. But it was a longer learning curve with some of these reviewers where it's like, look, your job is to tell people the best thing they can get for the price. And maybe if you want to, what I try to do, explain why we've got to the situation we have. Me explaining why AMD does certain things isn't me defending them. It's me telling you why we got here. So you understand that it's not just miners bought all of it or NVIDIA's evil. None of those things are true. And at the end of the day, when the 6600 XT launched, it was at MSRP for a whole day, and it was like $200 less than the frickin' 3060 while using less energy. And I told, I had some people say that, they took our advice and they were happy they did. Like, there was like 2 days where if you listened to me and I said, look, I know it's not priced greatly, but if you need a new card, you need to get it. This is your option this year. This is the last call before there's no availability during the holiday season. Some people took that advice, and it's not great, but it's a more efficient 5700 XT. So there you go. At least you got that instead of a $400 1660 Ti or some crazy crap.
Yeah, I like the market's not great right now, but that's why if you don't have to buy something, you shouldn't buy something.
Exactly. But I just do with my information what you can, and at the end of the day, the information suggests that it is way better priced than its Nvidia counterparts on the streets. All right, another thing, the Royal Core project. This was an interesting one because, as you've known for like half a year before I leaked this in August, that I knew about all these crazy architecture names and products being worked on by Intel that I just couldn't talk about because my sources were like, no, really don't. This could start a witch hunt. And then stuff started to emerge here and there from adored and like weird, mysterious Reddit posts. And I just decided, hey, it's time to do this.
I forgot about that.
Which, by the way, half of that Reddit post, I'm still told that a lot of the stuff in there is half of it's wrong, but half of it wasn't. So I'm like, all right, I got to talk about this, guys. And my sources gave me the go ahead. And, it was such a hard to name video until like, what do I name Lunar Lake stuff? It's coming out in such a distance. Half the time people won't even click on it because they're like, there's no way he knows about it. But I did. And I still don't think enough people have talked about how big Royal Core is. In a few years, Intel wants to double IPC.
Yeah.
So, and they're looking at things like SMT4. They're looking at, I mean, honestly, some of the things I've heard about recently sounds even crazier than SMT4. I'm not going to get into it, but like the stuff they're looking at doing to enhance performance is wild. And I still can't get over how little people talked about this.
Yeah, and it's almost just because it's at a point right now where it's hard to cover, where like you can see these leaks, and I think with all the confirmation of Alder Lake that it's finally out now and people can stop, pretending that it's not Big Little, when anyone who's pays any attention has known that for like a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, about.
It's just almost hard to talk about because it's like some of the stuff with Alder Lake itself, I think, is confirmed by Alder Lake's existence, and it's just hard to talk about things like that are 4 years out, 3-4 years out sometimes, because most people don't want to pay attention to something for that long, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think that's absolutely true. And so that's why a lot of my leaks are like, people ask me why. I've literally seen this in the comments too, like from angry people, just like, it's obvious Tom don't got no AMD sources anymore because he hasn't leaked everything about Zen 5 yet. And I know some Twitter people said a few things, and it's like, dude, Zen 4 is not out. I only have so many hours in a day. I'm going to focus on what's coming out sooner and try to make that more concrete because it's coming out sooner. My leaks can be more accurate because less is going to change by then. There's no point to me telling you that Zen 5 is outside of rough performance estimates. And like I told you, Intel's doubling IPC in a few years. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, there's not much more to say about it. And like doubling at this point in time, probably means a range of things. I mean, there's a range to what that can mean because their architectures are not done.
Yeah.
Like they're years out.
And I've leaked parts of that in that video, like how wildly different versions of what was it? Lion Cove is what's going to be in like Lunar Lake or Nova Lake. Yeah, like Lion Cove, how crazy some of the different versions were. Like some were just dropping entire things that would be necessary for running some legacy programs in favor of higher IPC and stuff like that. And other things were not, and it's like, and there's yes or no's. They're like literally deciding this, and it, but we still don't know which one they're going to go with.
Yeah. So we can like talk about what they're going to be targeting, and, it's going to be, maybe it will slightly exceed their targets. Maybe it will not quite hit their targets. But, hearing they're trying to double performance in a couple of years gives you an idea of where things will be. It doesn't completely tell you. It doesn't definitively tell you exactly where they'll be. And that's where you need to like listening to some stuff online, like saying RDNA 5 or not RDNA, like sure, RDNA 5 is going to have 6 times better performance than it does right now. And I know all of this definitively. It's like you
literally don't. AMD doesn't know.
Yeah.
AMD didn't know what their overall target for RDNA 3 would be until my understanding is mid 2021 or something. Like they really did not know yet, and even then, like, they didn't have a lot of confidence until like Q1 2021. Like to say that you knew what RDNA 3 was before that, AMD wasn't sure if it'd be like 50% better or 100, until they got some other things like Vcache working. So I don't even know if we forgot to get to that. I mean, I think around here is when AMD announced Vcache, by the way.
Oh, yeah, it would have been.
It's not in the notes, but I mean, I don't know that I have much to say about that. I'll give it an honorable mention, though. I didn't see that coming that soon.
No.
And I literally had one of my contacts go, wow, I heard about this, but I didn't think it'd be announced for months. Holy crap. But, what did get a lot of views for me, and what does get a lot of talk to this day, my PS5 Pro and Xbox refresh leaks, which no surprise that people paid 10 times more attention to this than my Lunar Lake leak. But I don't know how much I have to say about the PS5 Pro and Xbox Series refreshes. What I do remember, though, is two takeaways I have from in hindsight. I added this leak in the beginning of the video, kind of talking about what games were about to be announced in a press thing from Sony. Half of it, I don't know if it was half, maybe a third of it was wrong. And that's where I'm like, I'm kind of done leaking video game stuff. Unless it's like something as concrete as like the God of War thing. Because games can come out literally years later than they were supposed to. And if they do, that's years of people telling you you're wrong. And it's like, that's the first thing I will say.
Yeah, I mean, with some stuff, it's just like, games are all over the place when they come out at this point.
And they might get canceled too. Like, we know there was a PS3 version of Gears of War 3 that people uploaded gameplay from, never came out.
Yeah, and they're all over the place. Like, no one really trusts release dates anymore, so it's almost hard to even talk about. It's almost pointless to leak video game stuff specifically at this point, because it's like, I guess maybe that we'll see that in the year 2023 then, if you say something right now. If it's about a game that's about to be announced, I guess you can... I guess if you concretely know that something like that, that's fine. But other than that, it's just, they're hard to talk about.
The other thing that blew me away was the skepticism around this. This is, to me, is like saying there's going to be a sequel to God of War. It's like, no shit. People saying there's no way there's a PS5 Pro is the most absurdly moronic thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, and
I'm not saying there has to be, but why would you doubt it?
I think the only way that it doesn't happen is if this for some reason becomes a shorter generation that only lasts like 5 years or 4 or 5 years.
Which is what I think Sony should do, for the record.
And if that's what happens, there's no reason to launch a PS5 Pro. But I think it's just obvious intuitively that they would be in the design stage of a PS5 Pro by now.
Absolutely. And they are. Like, that's what I'll say. They are, guys. Will it come out? Well, I can't promise you that, but they're certainly working on it. And 2023 makes a lot of sense to me. 3 years later, just like the PS4 Pro, that will be when shortages should be better. And that's when there will be more competition again. And that's when you refresh your stuff. Now, the Xbox Series S refresh as well was the only one that was soon, but it's because if you look at my leak, I was told it was the same die. A probably 6 nanometer version with all 24 compute units enabled instead of 20. So right there's a 20% increase. Likely higher clock speeds. So right there's another 20. Like, I actually think the Series S refresh makes a boatload of sense too. Like, I'm like, man, so what? On 6 nanometer, a smaller version of it that's like 30 to 50% stronger, so that you can...
Also, not to mention the Series S is weaker than it should have been.
I mean, it really is. It should either be there's just no way around it. It should have had a terabyte of... It should have had 12 gigabytes of RAM and a terabyte of storage.
Yeah, it should have had not terrible RAM segmentation and more storage.
Yeah, I mean, I'm telling you guys, every dev I speak to is worried about that thing's longevity, or at least holding back the performance of the Series X. But, I guess let's move on then. I don't have much else to say about that. The only other things from this quarter were RDNA 3 and RDNA 4 performance leak. Which this was a big one, though, and it should have been. I guess it wasn't one of the biggest videos of the year, but it was up there. Like, I am confident, guys, that not only does AMD want to at least bring you, 60 to 100-ish percentage more performance with RDNA 3, that they want to do it again with RDNA 4 if they can. Now, I think the RDNA 4 increase will be smaller than the RDNA 3 over 2, so you might look at like 50 to 80% or something instead of like 60 to 100. But that should put everything into perspective when it comes to rising prices, because we're just in this awkward phase where it sucks. But if in 2024 we're sitting around with cards 4 times stronger than what we have now, and remember, they don't even need a double performance twice for that to happen. They can do like 1.9 times, like they don't actually need to. If we have things 4 times stronger than now, okay, and this is what I say in the video, if the 8700 XT is $700, but it's stronger than a 3090, I don't know. I don't know if anyone cares if 4K 120 is just child's play at that point, even if it's 700. Like, if it's just child's play.
And I think to an extent that's where we're heading. And I just hope that it didn't quite happen. Well, it probably did happen in a few places. I just hope there isn't a regression in price performance, because ultimately that's all that matters at a certain point, because we've harped on over and over on this podcast, these increasing tiers in performance are reaching a point where I don't think you're really getting that much more out of the top tier versus the mid-range.
It's becoming harder to notice the difference.
Yeah.
Or appreciate it, maybe. I guess even appreciate it.
Yeah. And if 2 years from now, things are 4 times stronger, and there's a further, and let's say the pricing tiers shift up one more peg once again. It's like, yeah, you're buying an 8600 or for 500. No, you're buying an 8600 for like, I don't know, $500 or $600 maybe. But it's also the performance of, I don't know, 6800 XT or so, or well, no, if it's like $500 and it's the performance of like a 6800 XT or a 3080 Ti or probably something like that, who cares?
Based on my roadmap here, I'm looking at my chart again. I mean, I basically projected that an 8700 XT is probably going to be at least, I don't know, twice as strong as the 3090. So if it's $700 for double a 3090's performance, I understand games get harder to run, but they're not going to be probably that much. I mean, we're talking about laughing at 4K 120 at that point for $700. And I understand games get harder to run, but half the reason games get harder to run is we tend to push the resolution up. And I don't think that's going to happen as much in the future.
I don't think 8K is going to get widespread adoption until, or if it ever gets widespread adoption, honestly, until it's like there's literally no reason to not get the 8K monitor instead of a 4K.
I've said that too. Like that's what I think.
That's the only way I see it not getting adoption over 4K, because I think most people struggle to see past 4K, and at a certain point 8K really might just be better for like productivity, because imagine how much shit you can put on an 8K screen.
Right. And I think you could almost argue there was a smaller a version of that effect that happened with 4K. I mean, 4K is pretty much standard now, at least in TV. It's becoming fairly standard in monitors now that you're finally getting decent ones with decent response times that are above 120 hertz for under 1,000, like you got for Christmas.
For like doing productivity work, would you say like having a 4K monitor, it effectively feels like having two 1080p monitors?
Easily.
Doing
I
work.
actually think it's a little better because I'm less forced to segment off these boxes that have to be huge to not look pixelated or something, and I would say that what I was going to say though is I would say that kind of already happened with 4K though. Like no one was really willing to buy 4K over 1440p monitors until it was like 50% more to do it, right? Like as long as it was way more. And you're still got people not willing to. And I think you will get to a point where eventually there will be this floor where it's like, look, a 4K 144 hertz monitor's $300. I understand the 1440p one's $200, but at a certain point, the cost of the other components are making them closer in price. I think you're going to have to be very, very close for 8K to be worth it to most people. And it'll have to come simultaneously when, like we say, mid-range graphics cards can do 8K 60 easily. If not, honestly, 8K 120, because I just think 120, you see it in console games now, it's just going to be expected. Let's get back to the final story here. So there were also a series of neural engine leaks in September as well. I don't have much to say about this, except that I thought it was interesting to see both Intel and then AMD talking about adding these things to both like Zen 5 and Meteor Lake around the same time.
I think the fact that all big tech companies are putting some of their eggs in this basket means that it's going to play an important role in the future. Like, I don't know all the implications that it has right now, but I can see that everyone is moving towards using some of their die for neural engines means it's probably important.
Yeah. Timo writes in, he says, I just got an idea from a previous guest on the Xbox Series X roadmap. How do they securely lock down running their games on newer versions with changed hardware? These are custom Ryzen SoCs in the consoles, but a guest mentioned it wasn't simple anymore to adjust stable clocks with PBO, many other features added. So I wonder, is it easier or harder than, say, I don't know, the 90s and 2000s, when consoles and CPUs were simpler in architecture to achieve performance compatibility across revisions? I would say it's easier per SKU, but now there's more SKUs, and so they're not as well optimized. Because like the difference between like, again, a PS2, an Nvidia graphics card, an AMD graphics card, and a GameCube were freaking ridiculous. Like the games were simpler, so there was less to be done. True, but they were wildly different platforms. I don't know. I think that building things for both the PS5 and Xbox Series X has to be easier. Unless, again, you're just talking about the fact that the game is so complicated, right? But again, I think about this. So what? There's going to be an Xbox One, which they just have to drop support for with new games. I mean, come on. The Xbox One base, the Series X, the Series S, Series S refresh, Series X, and the Series X Pro. I already hear about them complaining about trying to optimize between them and just not having enough RAM. In the Series S, like, I don't know how much this is going to keep holding back their peak performance, though, if they want to brag about having the strongest console, because it's just not panning out. And the more SKUs they add, the more it's hard to optimize between them. And as much as you can say Sony's is, they have a few as well. I mean, kind of. The PS4 Pro is
4. Well, no, they have 3.
Yeah,
not 4.
Right, they have 3. The PS4 Pro is also a double PS4, and the PS5 is a faster one. That some of the lazy indie devs, there's literally an SDK for just running in PS5 mode as if you programmed it for PS4. I've heard. So it's like, I don't know. It isn't the same situation though.
Yeah.
In terms of like, I couldn't tell if he was talking about security features though. I mean, I don't know. I think they've already hacked the Series S and maybe the PS5, so they're not as secure as in terms of getting bootleg stuff on them as they were before. That's just true. All right, and then let's now move on to quarter 4. I titled this quarter, Arc Leaks Hit a Fever Pitch while AMD admits they've got crazy stuff coming. There's the first pictures of Arc, finished Arc, and I show the little 128 execution unit model as well. I don't have much to say about this. I'm actually going to save most of the Arc discussion for maybe 5-10 minutes from now. There's also the story. Let's get to. Do you have anything else to say about? Again,
no. Arc in general, it feels like it's one of the most leaked graphics cards of all launches of all time.
If you follow Moore's Law is dead, if you don't follow Moore's Law is dead, no one's leaked anything.
That's true.
Besides Igor's Labs,
reason,
he has.
Yeah, it's just for some reason. I guess we know a bunch about it. We know what it looks like. We've basically known the specs of it for a while now, and all that there is left is to see what side of the fence it falls on in performance. Is it going to be perform slightly above expectations, slightly below expectations? It's looking more and more like it's going to be like 3070 Ti level, though, something like that.
Which, if you go back to my leak from, I think, October 2020, that's what I said the whole time. I think the more I look at it, it's probably exactly what was communicated.
Yeah.
What do you think? Why do you think that is that no one else has any of this? I mean, other leakers have had Arc stuff, but like, I don't know. I guess I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but it's like, I guess I've proven I do have the best Intel sources, and let's just say it, guys. I mean, I've had pictures for months. I've had the performance target since last year. While most people were saying it would never come out, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I
guess
know.
I guess I'm just patting myself on the back. I'm trying to think if there's anything from the Leasant. That's like a Lisa who you met recently. I don't think there's anything from the recent nor the Leasant leak to really discuss over what we had before. I kind of just ironed out exactly how it will be segmented. The biggest part of it being that 256 execution unit model, which many have talked about offline before, is the most interesting one, I think.
And
it's literally cutting the die, disabling half a die.
Yeah, I know. I didn't accidentally leak it in our last Broken Silicon, but the last one we recorded where we were in person together,
Oh, really?
Offhandedly brought up that it's weird that there isn't a die there, and then you're like, there might be.
Oh, yeah. Well, so did I technically leak it, or did you?
I didn't leak it. I just offhandedly.
Oh, you're right. You said there wasn't another one. That's true. You're right. Before my Arc leak came out, the last news.
And you had not brought that information to me, so that wasn't me accidentally leaking something. That was just me offhandedly saying something.
Yeah, you did accidentally go, yeah, it's weird there's only 2 dies. No one noticed. Yeah, I guess they didn't know the implications of that, though. But yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I guess the one thing I will say is I I'll say this because we've talked about this. I should say it. The most shared part of that ARC leak is the tray of dies, and I didn't expect anyone to care about that.
Well, Tom, when you show a tray of dies, you get a bunch of nerds that are like, oh, what does this mean?
Well, yeah, but that's the thing is...
doing their little digital measurements.
I was talking to Mary Kate, who is my significant other, about this. I was like, I don't get why people are sharing this picture so much and not the other one. And then we were talking, I was like, oh, wait, this is the second picture of the die. Maybe that's why. I don't know if there's literally any pictures of the little die yet outside of Igor's diagrams, but not dies. I think I may have literally had the first pictures of 128 Execution Unit EU.
Yeah.
So
that's probably why.
Which I know other people have. I guess that's all I will say. So because and I don't mean other leakers. That's not what I mean. I don't, although it wouldn't surprise me if other ones did, I guess. But I do know there are some circles that have more pictures of ARC. I guess I just assumed it had circulated more. And I guess that's what I'm saying very clearly, guys, is when I said in that tweet, new pictures of ARC, I meant I showed the real pictures of the 128 Execution Unit model. I didn't even think... I literally showed that tray as a placeholder. I thought we all knew everything there was to know about how the dies look. But that's what everyone's sharing, which is interesting.
Yeah.
I guess I have to make that clear, though, because I don't know which iteration of the dies it is. So don't read into it to the point of me saying this is final production or anything, because they haven't even started final production, as I said in my leak.
Yeah.
I guess since we're on this note, which, by the way, Dan, I was trying to not talk about this yet, but you dived right in.
Yeah, I forced it on accident.
Did you realize it when you said it?
Yeah.
It's okay. But let's just get through it right now. Happy holidays, everybody. Today's piece of content is sponsored by cdkeyoffers.com. This holiday season, I think there's a lot of things you might be shopping for when it comes to software, whether it's the latest PlayStation, Steam, Origin, or other gaming platform games, or if it's a key for Windows 10 Professional, Windows 11, or even Office 2021 to get gaming next year with a new build, or maybe to just stay productive at work. No matter what you need, whether it's for work or play, CDK Offers has you covered for a reasonable price. And in fact, you can save even more money than what you're seeing on screen if you use these offer codes that help Moore's Law is that if you use them. Broken Silicon gets you 30% off Windows keys, and Die Shrink gets you 3% off everything on the website, including games. So whether you're looking for a piece of software to occupy your leisure time over this holiday season, or you're looking for a reasonably priced Microsoft software, which usually, let's be honest, they're just not, go to cdkeyoffers.com today, use the link in the description, and, well, have a good holiday season where you don't overspend thanks to cdkeyoffers.com. Clean Sweep writes in, what's up with Intel graphics? The latest ARC leak has me worried. As a gamer who's trapped on old hardware due to the current market mess, hearing that Intel hasn't provided AIBs to test out their PCBs yet, while Intel is promising a Q1 2022 launch, makes me worry that there's another ARC delay coming, and every delay brings ARC closer to RDNA 3 and Lovelace reveals that could blow it out of the water. Well, first, let me cut you off there. Yes, I haven't done the whole Lovelace leak yet like I did like Ampere, or the RDNA 3 leak like I did for RDNA 2, where I'm like, or like I just did with ARC, where I'm just like, nope, here's all the SKUs, here's what they're testing, here's the performance level and likely pricing of each one. I haven't done, that hasn't come out for RDNA 3 and Lovelace yet. Having said that, I don't think you need to know more. I already know roughly what they're going to price it at. I've told you they're looking at $2,000. I've already told you they're looking to double performance, and NVIDIA is probably going to be more like 80%. But I could see them doubling it if they use 500 to 600 watts, which they might. You know, I think you know what you need to know.
And I also think paying attention to these leak cycles, especially now, I think based on where we're at with RDNA 3 and Lovelace, it seems like Lovelace is a weird story because Hopper was a thing forever, and then Lovelace edged out and appears to be what actually is going to be going to gamers. But all that being said, based on like my knowledge of these cycles, I would still guess RDNA 3 and Lovelace are at least like 10 plus months out from coming out, if if that. I don't think that they're even coming out in 2022 necessarily.
Yeah, I don't remember if we have a reader mail asking that. Let me look down here. Let me see.
So, I mean, all that to say, like, yeah, RDNA 3 and Lovelace will probably blow Arc out of the water, but Arc is also probably coming out at least 8 months before, I think.
I would say that it's coming out at least half a year before, and that it's coming out on a mature 6-nanometer node that will not make it a pointless card anyways. I mean, think about it. So let's really put things in perspective here. Let's just say RDNA 3, the top one is, let's just say double. It's double the 6900 XT, and it's $2,000. Let's even say it's 120% stronger. Like, whatever. Okay. Cut that in half. I think they will have something 80% the performance for 1200. Like, that'll be their new 7900 XT. So I think they'll have a I think, and I've said this in videos before, I think what they would do if they get above 100% more performance is they make the top one called the 7950 XT. Just give it a new tier. Come on. You got the performance crown. Justify it being at 2000. And they launch a 7900 XT that's 2 chiplets, but kind of like the 5900X. It's not fully enabled. So it's probably like 75, 80% the performance. That would still put it at like 80% stronger than a 6900 XT. Then they're like, it's 1200. Then I think maybe the 7800 XT, if they just had one die and clocked it really fast, that one will probably be like 800 and be 20% better than a 6800 XT or something. You know, or should I say 20% better than a 6900 XT. So think about what I'm saying, guys. Think about the stack in your head. So you're going 2000 for something over twice as strong as what we have now, 1200 for something 50 to 80% stronger than what we have now, 800 for something 20% stronger than everything we have right now. That sounds realistic to me. That means that for the what we would call the 7700 XT, the replacement of the 6700, it's probably going to be 550 to 600 and be about as strong as a 6900 XT. I don't see how that really hurts Arc if it's 500 or less. Like, it's going to then be like 40% stronger, and Arc will have been out for half a year below 500, and they can just drop it to 400. It's not an issue.
Unless the existence of something above the 6900 XT somehow influences your decision to buy a mid-range to low high-end card, which doesn't quite make sense.
Right. You know, you get Arc in probably early quarter 2, not quarter 1, because you want a 16 gigabyte 3070 that has extra features, and you'll have been gaming on it for half a year, and you couldn't have gotten it before that. There wasn't a 16 gigabyte 3070 besides the 6800 XT, but AMD doesn't make that, so that card practically doesn't exist. So, yeah, I don't think you'll feel bad, you know. But yes, the longer they push it back, the less competitive, the less time it has is a big deal. But Clean Sweep continues, going back to finish his question. Without compromising sources, could you explain what is going on here? Is it just underestimating the turnaround time for testing until being a perfectionist with their GPU silicon, a misguided attempt to save time by just dumping tons of dies on AIBs, or something else entirely? No. Here, I think I'll just answer your concerns with this statement I wrote ahead of time, which is they will likely fully launch at least a couple of products in quarter 1. And I have almost no doubt most, if not all of the lineup, well, I shouldn't say that because we don't know, right? That they'll have plenty of things out by the end of quarter 2. I'm not worried about Arc. I do think they'll have something out in quarter 1. So I don't think there's almost any chance of them having an official delay. I just have a real problem with them continuing to say Arc is quarter 1 and then kind of making it sound like, because what they're making it sound like is in February, they're going to launch a high-end and a mid-range card. Laptops will be out. That's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is in March, you're probably going to get some limited laptop launches and maybe a couple desktop low-end stuff. That's it. That's my problem with them calling it quarter 1. Arc is coming out quarter 1, but if they were being honest, they'd probably say coming to laptop quarter 1. That's not what they're saying. They're saying on shelves, quarter 1, comma, desktop, first desktop cards. I just find that hilarious.
On shelves in a Dell warehouse.
On shelves in a Dell warehouse, quarter 1. Exactly. I'm trying to think, was there anything else about it? I guess the only other thing people keep saying they're worried about the drivers. I'm not really worried about the drivers. I just worry if they'll like have, although I almost said I worried if they'd have something comparable to like Wattman ready. But from what I hear, it actually, might have a better version of Wattman ready already.
And,
so I'm not that worried.
And I think that's a thing that there's almost no reason to worry about as a consumer at this point. Like, we'll see when the reviews come out, do a bunch of reviewers complain about the drivers? Okay, well, then that's a thing to talk about. Beyond that, I don't know what else you can say. Like, they've been developing these drivers technically for years. I know, like, you have sources that say that there are some issues with the drivers, but it's 4 months before it comes out. It's not like they've never programmed drivers before. I'm sure they will have something functional by the time it comes out.
Right. And you need to remember that half the reason for delays may be the drivers themselves. So, like, there's a reason low end is coming out first. It's less complex. They've already done drivers for 96 EU cards. And actually, I think DG1 is 128 EU, if I remember right. So they already have program for that type of stuff. And so they'll have that ready. Then they'll have the big cards ready. And then they will have workstation ready, because the workstation ones need to be more perfective of the big die. So, like, there's a reason it's releasing the way it is. I'm not really worried about any of it. It's just I would pay attention to the asterisks around which product's actually coming out in Q1. And I think that they need to come clean soon, though, because there are definitely some financial analysts, I'm sure, that won't be happy with this. That they keep kind of acting like it's coming to everything in February when it's not. It's literally not. Like, they're not making it till, they're not even producing the second die, the big die, until like late February. So it's not coming out in February. Maybe they could do a paper launch. And guys, wouldn't surprise me if they tried to. But drivers don't sound ready, so I kind of think more like end of March. Alrighty, and is that really Q1? And then let's see what else there is, though, from the Q4 2021 information. Any more thoughts on Nvidia halting Ampere production in October? Because that was a big thing for the channel. That was confirmed weeks after I leaked that again, like a lot of our leaks, that, everyone said, we got word they've halted production of Ampere right in the holiday season. And yes, for everyone listening, that is abnormal decisions.
Yeah, there's not much else to say other than woo, higher prices continue to stay high.
Exactly. I think there's another component to this everyone should acknowledge that I didn't really go into in the original leak, which is that there's all of this slowdown in shipping. So they're like, okay, so not only will this bring down our pricing, we're going to make less money because the shipping costs more. It's literally in our best interest to just not produce cards for a month. For multiple reasons. There's multiple reasons. It's not just keeping prices high. The problem is if prices came down right now, they wouldn't be making as much profit. Even more so, they might be down to just like 40 or 50% profit margins, which is just not enough for Nvidia anymore. So that's what they're doing. And yeah, I guess that's all I have to add to it is there is more logistical reasons for them doing this. And also they can probably save some of that up for other things to be produced at Samsung's 8 nanometer and then just have a huge blowout production. Again, I didn't say they're not producing any cards in Q4. I just said they halted it probably for a couple weeks. They're probably just going to, they've already probably spin it up again late November and December when they've decided what the super free refresh will look like. And then they'll just have a ton of that Q1.
And the only other thing I can really add to that is I still don't, I'm not sure if the shipping crisis thing has been ameliorated at all.
I don't think it has, to my knowledge.
Like, if they're just paying, like from what I've heard, some of those shipping crates have like tripled in price over the last year. And if those are just sitting in port for weeks, I can understand why they would decide to not want to ship stuff for a few weeks.
Right.
especially if there's some big backup that was expected in late October, mid-November.
The thing is, this is very different, though, from my understanding of what AMD is doing. Well, for all AMD products, really, that AMD is actually increasing Navi 23 production, and they're going to have a ton of Navi 24 production early next year because they do want to get more volume out there when NVIDIA's has less. Like, they really are. But it's not going to be enough, and it's different from how Sony is doing anything they can to make more PS5s, and they're furious. Production's falling behind PS4 and aligned sales, or at least sales are falling behind, aligned with the PS4. I don't know about production, I guess. And it's because it's a different business model, though. They don't need to make money on the PS5. They just need to get it in your hands by the holiday season so you buy games for Christmas.
Yeah, and that AMD, I think, speaks to just they have a different, they have to have a different strategy than Nvidia. They need to, maybe in some cases prioritize, not prioritize profit per unit sold and more, expanding their place in the market.
Which they didn't really do in 2021. We can talk about that a little bit. I mean, I think there's been this perception that AMD made a miscalculation and they made more Zen 3 out of greed than graphics cards. That's not strictly true. They've made, and I was talking to people in the Discord about this a few days ago, actually. They've made as many cards, they've made more cards for this generation than last gen. And when you consider half of that was high-end cards, they've certainly reserved more silicon for this generation than they have ever. RDNA Navi 21 is the biggest die AMD's made for gamers ever, and yet they were selling they're keeping market share with Nvidia, which is about 20-something%. So that means never before have they shipped this much millimeters squared of silicon to gamers. I mean, even the 6700 XT is bigger than the Radeon 7 in die size. Like, they've shipped as many cards as they can. They're devoting way more silicon to these cards than is necessary for profit margins, for sure. It's just, you reserve your capacity ahead of time. They can't magically get more. And if you look at these, how many times have we seen this, Dan? Like, some company moves to a different node and you instantly see AMD buys up capacity. They're always buying it up when they can, whether for consoles or for graphics cards. So, having said that, I think they know that they should be buying up, even doubling their efforts to buy it up, and that's what I kind of hear they're doing with Navi 24.
I think that also just shows that the market is being driven entirely by that difference in demand for silicon versus supply, and not individual products then almost too, where it's just you're not really finding anything easily available still. So to me, that says that it's just the supply demand of silicon itself is what's insane.
Yeah, well, and I guess all this is to say that that's probably why AMD is willing to increase Navi production, like Navi 23, or like literally shifting the most profitable die they've ever made for gaming graphics cards, Navi 21. They're shifting that to making a few Navi 23s, which, though overpriced by everyone says, is a lower profit margin than this, than certainly the 6800 XT or 6900 XT. So they're doing that for a reason, producing in a time where production's most expensive, moving over to less profitable, smaller dies, because they do realize that they have failed to capitalize on meeting NVIDIA in performance for the first time in a decade.
Yeah.
So we'll see if they do better next year, but that is for the conversation with David. Conversation for today, though. Last thing I have, I guess two more things, from this story. So what about the Zen 4D and Zen 5, and then in AMD literally a week later confirming Bergamo is real? Like, is there any last thoughts about Zen 4 leaks and Zen 5 stuff specifically from this year?
That press thing that AMD had where they confirmed Bergamo.
Their data center keynote.
Yeah, Jesus. Yeah, I was forgetting the word. That keynote was just kind of funny. It was the Tom's Right Power 37 minutes.
The power, not Power Hour, Power 37.
It was not a Power Hour. It was a Power 37 minutes. But yeah, I mean, once again, none of those things are going into consumer products. All we can say is that this means that MCM is almost definitely coming to GPUs with RDNA 3 or RDNA 4. And those small, and
if you look at the MI200, I forgot to put that in the notes as well. God, there's so much news this year.
And if they're, what are they calling them? Their C cores or cloud cores. That will probably come to the consumer end at some point, but that remains to be shown if they
or
will
if
do
it's
that
even
or not.
Literally that, like they might even tweak the cloud cores to be more consumer oriented and then launch that as its own thing. We'll see.
Yeah.
I guess it's just worth an honorable mention again. that was another blowaway conference, just like when AMD showed Zen 3D off for the first time. It is really worth mentioning. Just we literally were gonna record. We recorded, I think, a day late because of this conference. And usually, half the time, it's a waste of time. It's a gamble when we do it. But I had a good feeling at least one big thing would be announced. It would be probably worth it. And to be fair to my point that it's half the time a waste of time. Literally half a day later, there was the Nvidia conference that we almost delayed for as well because we were like, maybe they'll announce Super. They announced so much of a nothing burger. I don't even know why they had that conference to a certain point. That was it GTC this year or something. Anyways,
Yeah, it was GDC.
I think it was GTC, if not GDC. I think it's
No, it's GT. I think the T becomes a D a lot.
Yeah.
I think on accident.
That's what she said. But I don't even know if that made sense, that joke, but it feels like it did. But, and then I remember me and you looking, or I watched it and I said, Dan, did you see this yet? And you were like, no. And I'm like, yeah, it was good we delayed the recording. I mean, they confirmed Milan X, multi-chip graphics or accelerators, I guess they're probably called now, data center accelerators, and Bergamo, Genoa, all in one conference. It was just absolutely crazy. And that there was clearly them saying, we know Alder Lake's out. We know Sapphire Rapids is coming. We know Raptor Lake's coming. Guess what's also coming? Everything else from us. So just stop worrying. They usually don't show things off that far ahead of time, like Bergamo. I literally think it was influenced by the fact that I had already leaked it, and so had, I think Executable Fixed leaked some stuff about it. I don't remember if he did. So I think someone else did a little bit. But that it was literally, we knew about it already, and they wanted to make sure that everyone knew that, because all these crazy Intel rumors have been coming out for stuff years ahead of time. They're like, oh, no, we'll crazy stuff at the same time as well.
Yeah.
All right. Crazy stuff not coming is Nvidia buying ARM, though. That is the last story from Q4 that I have for us to discuss here. I don't know that there's really any new information since that news came out. Like, it seems like the EU's backed down to wait for others to finish those investigations first. That doesn't mean they're not going to investigate it. I don't know. Everyone I've asked that's an expert after this has said, yep, it's dead. This isn't going to happen now. Any final thoughts on Nvidia being blocked from buying ARM?
No, not really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good that it happened. I mean, that spiraled out into doing an entire die shrink on it. But
yeah,
I think we've talked enough about it and enough about how much we didn't want it to happen.
Yeah. Well, it's not enough for 0x000FF4, though, because he writes in and he says, hi, researcher Dan and research subject Tom. If I was Jensen, now that the ARM deal is likely dead, my next move would be to push the open source RISC-V as hard as I could for two reasons. It was a big frick you to AMD and Intel because the customers will have yet another alternative and thus increase competition between these two companies. And point number two, so I will have a CPU platform like I would have had with ARM and do some kind of monopoly thing. Do you think that this is a reasonable possibility for this to happen, for them to do this? And if so, by how much, and what do you think is most likely to happen? P.S. Sorry if this doesn't make sense or I didn't word it well. I have had X amount of alcohol. Honestly, I think you may have had a little too much because I don't think it really changes anything. They've already had these ARM roadmaps. They didn't need to own ARM to do them. I think they still plan on using ARM. And even if they went towards RISC-V, I think they think it's just better. The whole monopolistic thing was the fact that they would just suddenly own ARM and could do things to other companies that use ARM. RISC-V, they can't do anything. So I think if they go with RISC-V, it's because they think it's best, not because they're going to become a monopoly.
Yeah, because RISC-V is completely open source too, right? So I mean, I won't be surprised if stuff moves in that direction at some point. It seems like RISC-V has been a thing people have been talking about now for, since this channel's been around at least.
I remember at Hot Chips in 2019. Yep, Dan. They were just always... Yeah, they were just always, it was the number one thing. Everyone asked, what are you most excited about? They'd say RISC-V. Here we are 2 years later. Okay, where's the RISC-V revolution, guys? Not saying it won't happen, but it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like these things move slower than you think. All right, now let us move on to the only story I actually have that is a new one. And I didn't talk about it yet, but you guys would be good to remember. Again, Moore's Law had leaked this first, that Windows 11 was indeed what they were going to call this thing they were about to announce in June, and that Microsoft would be launching it before Alder Lake comes out for a reason, because it has enhancements for Alder Lake's Big Little and just scheduling in general. Whereas as long as I leaked that first, there were a ton of people, by the way, if you check that tweet, and that replied to it going, there's no way that's true. Yeah, it was true. But what's funny is to see just how much of a flop it was. Story number 6, Windows 11, an absolute flop. Intel better not neglect Windows 10 performance moving forward. Quoting from Tech Power Up, Microsoft Windows 11 is now nearing its 3rd month since release, and it is, for all intents and purposes, a flop. Market research by Landsweeper, which surveyed over 10 million PCs across the commercial and personal market segments, reported that less than 0.21% of the users it surveyed had upgraded from Windows 10 to the newer operating system. The upgrade is free of charge. There may be several factors contributing to this lukewarm market response, but one of them is certainly to be the steep hardware requirements. Windows 11 requires a trusted platform module, which disqualifies PCs older than 2018 for upgrades, unless the user is willing to try out workarounds to the limitation. Another factor could be the clunky user interface, a less functional start menu than Windows 10, and several UI-related bugs. So, yeah, I mean, less than 0.2% of 2.21%. So it's 2. That's just crazy.
I would like to see how that compares to the jump to Windows 10, because that was also free, wasn't it? If you had Windows 8?
Windows 8 or Windows 7.
Oh, yeah. So it would be interesting to see a comparison to that. I mean, either way, it sounds low, because you would expect at least most enthusiast people to switch, even if it wasn't... if it was obviously better than Windows 10, because I'm sure there is a lot of this negligence to upgrade is just people not being aware that there's something new out, which is what I would think why I think like seeing the jump from Windows 8 to Windows 10 would be interesting. But I remember when Windows 11 was first shown off, it was like, oh, this looks like it's a backstep from Windows 10, and if they can continue to demonstrate that update sizes are smaller and if their scheduling is better on Windows 11, I'll upgrade to it eventually, but I don't want to yet until it's obviously better than Windows 10. And I'm praying they decide to make some switches back to the old UI, because as I also said when we talked about that initially, it looks like a shitty web design thing that everyone hates. Like those something about like how curvy it is, I guess, it just doesn't look good to me.
I don't like how it looks as much either. I like how Windows 10 looks. I completely agree. What I will say is, well, you were talking, I looked this up because you're right, we have to look this up to even discuss if it really is. But at this point, Windows 10 had 8% adoption.
Okay.
So this is bad.
Okay, I'm glad I brought that up then, because so that means that the adoption is 40 times less than
well,
than Windows
and I mean,
10.
let's be clear, Windows 10 just seemed like a better Windows 7/8 that combined the best parts of 8 in, like, added the tablet aspects, the faster, the lower requirements. Windows 8 was more efficient than 7, and they're like, yeah, it's a less efficient, or I don't know if less efficient, but a more demanding Windows 10 that adds nothing to the UI you wanted, fixes nothing, besides putting you front and center, which I don't want things front and center. I want things off to the sides, and when I launch things, I want that in the center. I have to say that this is not a surprise, though. It's just kind of jarring. It's not, none of that's a surprise. I don't know anyone who wants Windows 11.
Yeah, like they said, the only two advantages they say are the, what is it called, the thread scheduler or something?
Yeah.
Which, according to some testing, does nothing or actually makes the scheduling or makes performance on Alder Lake slightly worse.
Yeah, the thread scheduler, also known as turning off the little cores when you play Tomb Raider. Like, I think that was one of them.
Yeah.
Like, it actually performs better in 10.
Like the little cores literally just weren't being used in Tomb Raider in their in hardware unboxes testing of it. And I guess smaller updates is the other thing, which that's good, I guess. I don't like my OS taking up continually more and more space, but if you can't offer me any advantages over that, and the UI is, in my opinion, a huge step back, I'm not going to upgrade.
Yeah, and there's also, you know what? There's also this factor as well. So I've read that, like, if you have a Ryzen CPU and you upgrade from 10 to 11 without doing a full fresh install, that there is a lot of times big latency and cache issues. And it's like, well, then I don't want it. Like, and I understand some people are like, well, you should always do fresh installs you know what, guys? I'm busy. I put out so much content. Everything in my workflow on my desktop is tweaked just so. And it's so I can respond to news quickly, and I minimize the amount of time I do organizing a vid or like organizing the content for a video, so I can just make the videos. And I'm not dealing with anything that threatens that at all. I don't want Windows 11 at all for that reason, especially if it means I have to do a fresh install, even though it probably wouldn't be the end of the world. But it's like, yeah, I'm not doing that till I get Lunar Lake or something. I'd rather just put Zen 3D in my motherboard and say goodbye. And on that note, I can't help but think when I look at this, it has to be hurting Alder Lake sales.
No, yeah, I mean, it probably is. I haven't really even thought about that.
Well,
but
maybe you should, Dan. Let us move on.
Maybe
you should. Piece of shit. Let us move on to the wrap up, which I only had one news story, but I thought I would also put a wrap up in here. You know, let's not have all of this stuff have to be talked about in the first new episode in January. So one of them is that Intel is taking market share back from Zen 3, but not a ton. Not a ton. And I find that weird, especially if you actually do the research. You see that Alder Lake works fine in Windows 10. Just most people don't know that, I assume, or a lot of people might not know that. Maybe not most, but and that I guess, you know what? AMD didn't need to lower prices, guys. Let's just admit it. They were right. They did just fine not lowering prices.
Well, you know, once again, like if I were recommending an upgrade, I would recommend Zen 3 if you were already on AM4. So, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Even if it's slightly worse price performance for the CPU, the platform cost is cheaper.
And if I go to AMD's,
at least based on how I recommend.
If I go to AMD's website, which hasn't dropped prices on their processors at all, they're all sold out. So I know Micro Center's lowering prices, but AMD doesn't think that's necessary, and AMD was right. And meanwhile, guys, I just have to plug this. I've seen the i7 12700K selling for $350 with $20 off with a motherboard at Micro Center. This is something that beats the 5900X for $350. That's what you should get if you're building a new system.
Yes.
I'm sorry. It is. I recommend Alder Lake. Doesn't matter if you're on Windows 10. Get Alder Lake. Oh, I don't want to buy DDR5. Don't. DDR4 works fine, dude. All right, so that's part of the wrap up there. What else is there? I don't know. I guess since we're talking about Alder Lake, let me also point out that, yeah, I mean, the i3s look like I get why Alder Lake i3s will still just be 4 cores, 8 threads, because based on what I'm seeing, it's probably going to game about as well as a 5600X for half the price of a 5600X.
When those launch, that will be the recommended for entry-level gaming.
And I still have my reservations about supposedly Raptor Lake having only 4 cores and 8 threads for their i3s. That sounds a little silly to me. But again, what types of cores are we talking about, though? Because it sounds like Raptor Lake may go to 5.5 gigahertz and have a higher IPC. I don't know. I mean, okay, so will they need anything better than that? Because that will be as strong as a 5600X then next year. And if it's $120, why would they release anything else in the i3 range if AMD won't even launch something with more than 4? Like, they don't even launch low-end CPUs anymore, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that else it could be is if the i3 takes the place of what the low-end right? That's it. Yeah, the low-end i5s are this generation, and they just discontinue 4-core 8 threads altogether in their core series.
Which it sounds like for Zen 3D, what they might do for that generation is repurpose old Renoir dies, just disable the graphics and sell it as a monolithic i3 competitor.
Mhm.
Which honestly, though, I don't know if that is that great, though. Is it? I mean, this is Zen 2 This is Zen 2 with only 8 PCIe lanes, unless they've found a way to add an IO die next to it, which I doubt they would, because that negates why it's cheaper. Like, I don't know that having an 8-core Renoir is preferable to a quad-core Alder Lake.
Yeah, I mean, I would need to see those benchmarks to look at benchmarks to make that guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Moving forward, then, what else do we have? I don't know. There's just a bazillion leaks coming out right now about 3080 12 gigabytes, which is interesting. A 3070 Ti 16 gigabyte.
Yeah, I mean, let's just have more SKUs that are confusing and hard to tell apart, please.
Yeah, it's just, it makes some sense, but it's just, I still can't help but wonder. I don't know. I don't know. It makes sense to have a 12 gigabyte 3080, especially if, yeah, and it's almost sounding like Navi, or not Navi, GA103 may be laptop only / professional only, based on what I'm hearing. I haven't done a leak on GA103 quite yet, though, because I'm trying to confirm that stuff. Also, there's the 3070 Ti 16 gigabyte just literally launching their version of Arc, and 3090 Ti. There it is, guys. More confirmation from other people. Your 450 watt.
Hell yeah.
450 watt card that's going to be probably 10% better than the 30, at most. Maybe less than that.
If that.
Yeah, I mean, it'll have 5% more bandwidth as far as I can tell looking at the specs here. It'll have 4% more CUDA cores, I believe that is. So it'll be, but then they'll probably push clock speeds a solid amount. That's probably where a lot of that 450 watts is coming from. So yeah, I think 6% better or something. They want Hardware Unboxed to stop using the 6900 XT for CPU reviews. It's just eating at them, clearly. There's also the 3050. We haven't even talked about Navi 24 yet. I don't know that I have that much to say about it, though. I'll probably just talk about it with David. So I think we're okay not dwelling on the leaks for that,
Yeah.
MX550, Dan. That one's funny to me because literally for the preparation of my ARC 128 and ARC lineup leaks, I was like, as far as I can tell, the 128 execution unit ARC is probably around a 1650 Super or a little better. Okay, so the 96EU variant with a 4 gigabytes over a 64-bit bus, that'll probably be 30% weaker than a 1650 Super. Oh, so around a 1650 or 1650 Max Q, probably. Yeah, okay. Wait, so can I say that's around MX550 performance? I guess not. I just was like, okay, between MX450 and 1650, and then just literally a day after that leak comes out, they're like MX550 rumors. I'm like, oh, there it is.
They need their competitor, Tom.
Although looking at it, it is not based on a GA108. It is more like the 450, and that it is a cut down 3050 Ti with a 64-bit bus and only 2 gigabytes of memory. And I'm just going to say it, dude, that's not enough memory. 2 gigabytes isn't enough. It's just not.
Probably not. I mean, it would be better if it were 4, but it's the type of stuff it's going into, right? Like it's going into compact laptops that need a graphics card. Like there aren't very many of those on the market to begin with.
Yeah, I just can't see this. Rembrandt's probably going to be about the same performance as this. It's like, if they could just make a GA 108 that was a targeted one, it would make so much sense to me. But otherwise, it just seems dumb. I don't know. That's all I can say. I don't like it. I don't like it, Dan. I don't know who this is for when Rembrandt comes out, but I don't know. And then what else do we have here in the wrap up? Oh, one more big thing. Do you see this? 24 gigabit per second GDDR6 by Samsung.
Tell Nvidia they need to throw that into their 3090 Ti.
Yeah, shave off 50 to 100 watts. I know, right? Which it can use GDR6. So when is this? Wait, when is this? Let's see. Operates at this. Currently, Samsung is mass producing with 18 gigabit speeds. Let me look at this article here. It literally lists it officially, and it says on their website sampling. Okay, so I don't know if it would be ready though for the launch, but
That was also a joke.
it shouldn't be. Like they should use
Mostly.
this. Like it accepts those speeds. I just wonder if the controller could handle going there with this instead of GDR6X. But I'm sorry, this is better, and this would give you 10% more bandwidth than what the 3090 Ti is going to have supposedly. If they use this,
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at what bandwidth are we looking at here? You would be looking at 1.1 terabytes per second. So, yeah, I don't know. I think if they use this, yeah, they could have something fantastic. I don't know. Is that correct though too? Do they have this table wrong? I don't know. But I don't know. I think they should get anything they can get in. I think what we're looking at is what clearly RDNA 3 will use. And it just highlights how things keep getting better. Because I was like, I don't know if they gave, for instance, the Series S refresh, I think it has 14 gigabit per second memory. I was like, if they give that 18 at the end of 2022 and all that extra teraflops, yeah, you could have something that's more of half of the performance of a Series X. And people would go, well, they're not going to give it that fast memory. Guys, by the time it's out, 24 will be the standard. Not 16. So come on. Anyways, although they're probably just going to use 16 gigabit if I had to guess with the Series S refresh. But let us move on to the final reader mails in this rather girthy end of year episode for you guys. Have something to listen to while you're driving to your family. SpamThinG Spamgen writes him, when do you think we will have higher than 4 cores for the i3 CPUs? Or is the i3 the new quad core enough? Given AMD is making Zen 4C, great job on that leak, by the way. Thank you. Would they also make 4-core chiplets on the same node as other Zen 4 chiplets, or is it going to be on an older node like with Monet? Honestly, I think it just kind of sounds like Meteor Lake is when this is going to happen. But like we've kind of already covered, it depends on what AMD does. As far as I can tell, Monet's not coming out till the end of next year. I looked into it today, guys, again. So, I mean, there's no reason for the i3 to have more. It's not competing. So, I mean, Raptor Lake would be the first one to compete with this. And then when you think about it, though, okay, but if Monet has 4 Zen 3 cores on 12 nanometer, even if it's the same performance as a quad core on 7, which it could be, it's competing with Raptor Lake quad cores. Intel doesn't need to release more than 4 cores with Raptor Lake if this is what Monet is.
I think they're going to move off of 4 cores when it seems like it's just getting so easy. Will get so easy to make CPUs that have more than 4 cores, 8 threads, that it's just worth it to only make those, kind of like what AMD is doing on their most advanced nodes at this point, where it's like everything is an 8-core now because there's no reason not to make them that way.
And you have to wonder, though, if Zen 4 is going to have 16 cores at the top, which it sounds like it might, then why would they move up the core counts on the low end again? I think they probably will. They might give you 8 cores, no hyperthreading for like the, what would it be then, the 60 or the 7600X? But I don't know, and as if 16 is still at the top, I wonder if they'll bump that up even. And if they won't, it's like, I mean, remember, Intel's making monolithic. This is a unique advantage they have. Those i3s are their own die, by the way. They're not cut down.
Yeah.
So they can just churn these things out at a cheaper price than AMD can unless they launch some version of Monet that's monolithic. Now, frankly, what they should have launched already, I would argue, if they cared, AMD, is a version of Van Gogh. Monolithic. Has the latest I/O. And you know what? They might, because it uses DDR5. That might be what they do. But that's still only 4 cores, my friends. Timo H writes in, as a dystopian scenario, the latest guest mentioned most PC game studios plan for the lowest common denominator, e.g. the GTX 1060. What will 2022 and 2023 be if supply and demand force studios to continue using the same benchmark level, a 1060, for 1 to 2 more years, adding to that possibility losing bunches of gamers either to mobile or casual Facebook games due to 3D GPU breaking and have to resort to iGPUs? Will the 1060 still to be used as a viable possibility? I don't know. Aren't things designed to only last 5 years as well? Won't people's graphics cards be breaking by then? And there's a few things here, Timo. Number one, the lowest common denominator is still the PS4, which is something around an overclocked Cezanne chip, or Rembrandt will be stronger than that. So the common denominator is actually lower than that. And the reason they keep programming to that, I've thought about this today. It's not like, just as a counter argument to what I've been saying, like the PS5 is outselling the PS4, though now it's not all of a sudden because it's the supply problems. But the PS5 outselling the PS4, yeah, but more people are gaming this year than ever before. And that means they're buying more games and the developers still want them more. That's why they're programming their games still for PS4. And I guess all I can say is at least Alder Lake Mobile will be stronger than a PS4. At least Rembrandt will be like in between a PS4 and a PS4 Pro, but most people still won't have that. So I don't think there's anything we can do. I think what you got to remember is that whatever games were being planned, half of them won't be able to go backwards. So we know that Horizon and God of War and Gran Turismo all support PS4. I would say whatever exclusives are coming in 2023, most of them were probably planned to just be on PS5, though. And half of them probably won't be easily ported back to PS4. Could be wrong. But until then, we're just going to have to deal with it. Don't you think, Dan?
I mean, yeah, people are going to need to be strategic about when and how they buy their graphics cards. And if you have an old graphics card, you know, you should be looking for your replacement actively in the event that your 1060 breaks, if you're still gaming on that.
We had a person, a friend of ours in this situation, who kept saying his RX 480 was breaking and instead bought what I would argue were more wasteful purchases, and then now it's broken and he's kind of screwed. Unless he just bought something for an overpriced amount, which wouldn't put it past him. Yeah. You know, but this is why we're always saying, if you had a 480, get the 6600 XT and sell your 480 before it breaks. Having said that, though, moving forward to the actual question, I think this is something AMD and Nvidia and Intel are thinking about, though. There's no way around it. You can only game on your old 580 or 480 for so long. They're going to have to service the low end every now and then, or at least something around $300. And I think that's probably why AMD is going to pump out a ton of Navi 24. Still going to come down to price on that one because it only has 4 gigabytes of RAM. But again, it's all about price. If AMD basically makes what is effectively a 4 gigabyte 590 for $150, that's better than what you... Yeah. That'd be fine.
A bunch of low-end people will be fine getting
It'll be at least tie you over. And NVIDIA's probably got 3050s coming as they get pushed out of the laptop market. So those will come out to desktop. And I'd say if you're still gaming on these old things, just give it another 5 months, I guess, if you can. I do think there will be options at more reasonable pricing by then, you know, but that's why you should have always been looking this whole time when you can sell your old card. Okay. Laz writes in, "Hi, Tom. I would be interested to hear your opinion on the graphics teardown of the Rift Breaker. As far as I can tell, these games were built with ray tracing in mind from the ground up, rather than providing an alternative effect later in development. Switching off ray tracing is not even an option in these games. As far as I can tell, they mainly use ray tracing for shadows, but the technical details are a bit over my head. I haven't played any of the more commonly discussed ray tracing titles, as I don't have a good point of reference for what to expect." So, a few things. I looked into Rift Breaker. This is on PS4. And in an interview on WCCF Tech, they literally say they turn off RT shadows on the Series S because it couldn't run the performance. So, no, this clearly wasn't built from the ground up for ray tracing. Now, maybe ray tracing was more in mind when they designed this game, but clearly it doesn't need it.
Yeah, and I mean, just looking at the game itself, like it's clearly has a bunch of vibrant lights and colors. I'm sure ray tracing could look really cool in this game.
Yeah.
And it could be, or ray tracing will be utilized well in this game.
For anyone curious about this question, though, if they haven't listened to it yet by the time this comes out, the Obsidian game dev, which I think may be the best game dev interview we've had yet, fantastic interview. It's going under the radar a little bit just because, again, it's a guest episodes, unless it's a big name like Hardware Unboxed or Daniel Nenny, tend to get less views than the news episodes. But do not sleep on that episode, guys. We directly talk about this, and he is very open. He says that at the end of the day, we're just only going to use ray tracing for a checkbox as long as we need a program for the PS4 or even Pascal, because Everything is not able to run it, so it's only ever going to be an enhancement. And I even pushed and asked a question. Okay, so let's say that wasn't true. Let's say the PS5 is the lowest common denominator. Like that, it wasn't even just like a mid-level. Like, let's say that's the bottom, and the high end is something 5 times stronger than that, like, or 4, like it's 3090 SLI. What would ray tracing look like? And he's like, you'd see a lot more things like what you see on the consoles right now. And he brought up Spider-Man and Ratchet and Clank. He's like, those games seem to run ray tracing on mid-range hardware way better than anything else you've seen, right? That's because they designed that build of Spider-Man from the ground up just for the PS5. Now, they had to also put it on the PS4, but it was already on it, and, so, and same with Ratchet and Clank, which is only on the PS5.
And I do think it does need to be mentioned whenever, like, the subject of ray tracing does come up, just that ray tracing performance mode, right? That's what it was called. Ray tracing performance mode they have for, like, Miles Morales. Like, that's possibly the best implementation of ray tracing I think I've seen, where it's deployed smart and effectively to work well on a mid-range system, which proves that, ray tracing can work well on a mid-range system. It just needs to be there. It has to be designed that way and, actually be optimized to, it needs to actually be optimized to run well versus just rendering a bunch of rays and destroying performance.
Right. And you look at Ratchet and Clank, which actually has an unlocked frame rate 4K 60 mode, which typically stays above 50. Yeah, that's what's possible, guys. You could have games looking like Ratchet and Clank at 4K 60 with ray tracing with something that's a little weaker than a 6700 XT. That's what we could be doing right now, but that's only going to happen when they design it for one piece of hardware, And I actually, the next best example of it working well is people bring up Resident Evil 8. But even then, it has to run on PS4, has to run on Xbox One. Here's the thing. I literally brought up this example of a perfect example of how ray tracing is still just a checkbox. There's this scene early in the game. We have Lady Dimitrescu talking on a phone in front of a mirror. It was in a trailer. Very hallmark scene where she's talking about a ceremony and it's eerie and you're hiding. You can see her talking in the mirror and she throws the mirror and you see her reflection as the mirror spinning. And that looks really cool. And the devs said that didn't use ray tracing. We use screen space reflections because we have to show that important cutscene on a PS4. So even in that game, the mirrors are not using ray tracing. They're using the ray tracing for like the little pieces of it on objects because that's all they can do with it.
Yeah, let's move off of the old platforms.
I know, right? But that just tells you, everyone listening, like that's how it's held back. And if you look at games like Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition, which they did basically as a learning project for ray tracing, it actually runs better than the other version using most of its global illumination and lighting that needs a ray tracing card. And it runs pretty dang well, actually. So that's what's capable. But it's going to be rare to get games that run like Metro Exodus for this long because and that only came years later on a game that was older and now had stronger hardware to support it. They didn't launch with it. It would have been suicide, so that is the answer, pretty much no games still do it except for a couple of things on consoles because they was designed for one system. B-Fish writes in, a question that I've been thinking about frequently, both in the context of 2021 releases and 2022, what's the point at which spending money to upgrade gets you nothing in terms of usable performance, but rather gets benchmark numbers, i.e. ultra versus high, 140 plus FPS versus 120? I question why anyone would ever need more performance than, say, a 6800 XT on desktop and like a 3060 on laptop. I would say, look, more is always more. You can always find limited scenarios. If you pick the right settings, it becomes noticeable. But this is something we've talked about, that we think the 3070, 6700 XT is, for the most part, for 99% of people, the top. Like, it is the noticeable amount.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything else to add to that other than, like, is the game at a higher frame rate than your monitor is capable of? I mean, you're wasting performance there. Can you tell the difference between high and ultra? If you can't, well, then you just paid more to be able to check a box. And I think where things stand right now, the 3070 is about the max anyone needs. Like, yeah, you have to play with settings a little bit, but the question is, do you even notice? And the probably not is the answer in most occasions.
Yeah. So I guess that's all I can really say about that. And on laptop, I will say I actually mostly agree with the 3060, right? Because I was playing Battlefield 2042 on my laptop, and in that game, actually, a stronger GPU wouldn't have helped that much, despite having like a 6-core that was boosting to around 3 gigahertz and heavy loads, maxing out my 12-thread CPU in the multiplayer. And granted, this is double the player count of previous Battlefield. It's not really a surprise. I'm sure if I went to other rooms, I'd be getting 100 frames. But it just goes to show that on the harder maps, doesn't matter how much stronger my graphics card is, unless I had an 8-core Tiger Lake that actually would sustain boost clocks above 4 gigahertz, which most laptops don't. So I would agree that anyone looking for like a 3080 laptop, you better make sure it has 8-core Cezanne or 8-core Tiger Lake, and that in the reviews it actually boosts high enough. Because if you're planning to at least play games like 128 player ones like Battlefield 2042, you're not running really above 60 anyways, buddy. Alrighty. That's gonna do it for this episode. Again, we really enjoyed this year was crazy, Dan.
Yeah, it was.
And it just goes to show that this was about a bit longer than I think we expected it to be, but it was a crazy year. And, there's less videos during the holiday season, but I always hope that we can get you at least some more and longer podcasts, because you're probably traveling. And, if you're a patron, you're getting this early and ad-free. You got to ask questions of me and of the guest who will be on the next episode, David. Looking forward to 2022. We're actually doing something fun where he's like reading up on my leaks and other people's leaks for 10 different things, and he's going to talk about what he's most excited about if it all comes true. That should be a really fun episode looking forward in the year to next year. And otherwise, just, stay safe.
Yeah.
Be smart.
Safe travels, everyone.
Don't die of whatever the latest variants are.
Omicron.
Omicron. That's all I can think about when I hear about it. It's just like they picked the scariest sounding one, but maybe for good reason, it seems like now. I don't know. Any last words, Dan?
No, I don't think so.
Well, this comes out right before Christmas, so Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy holidays to everyone else, of course. And look forward to the next episode. Have a good holiday season.
Bye, everybody.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, I don't do this alone. Moore's Law is Dead is a team with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother, Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, and special assistance by Carbon Cry. Find all of our information, including the information of sponsors you can support, at www.mooreslawsdead.com. If you would like to send fan mail or hardware to us, please mail parcels to Moore's Law is Dead at P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. And speaking of fans, patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content possible. The aging business model of spamming ads all over the content is dying. The future of media will be built on fans paying for the content they actually want to exist. And so if you have the extra money, but only if you do, please consider supporting us. For just $2 a month, you get access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to have your questions read aloud on Broken Silicon, Die Shrink, and Loose Ends, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who would love to meet you and talk to you about computer hardware. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the entire back catalog of Flyover States podcasts and other projects Moore's Law is Dead has done, and thanks in the credits of videos and other perks as well. And hey, if you can't afford to support us, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family on social media, Reddit, and forums. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or your preferred podcast app. All of this really does help so much. And if you'd like to advertise on the podcast, hire Tom for consulting, or are a person of interest who would like to be a guest, please reach out to the email address mlhbdead@gmail.com. But as I said, this podcast would not be possible without its patrons supporting it, and so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher producer levels: Brad Medlin, Anthony Gareffa, GUK, Benny Berlin, Justin Yacht, Thomas Rupp, I love you, Lynn and Jim, Ivan K, Tom Bailey, Muhammad Al-Kawari, Frederick Lau, Lynn Lee, Justin Paris, Zachary Martin, Terrence Herod, Jada Full, Phil S, D31337 Antics, Jackson A. Miller, Jesse Jaskowiak, Josh Law, JB Jing, Travis Gooding, Mechanical Philosopher, Lee Wooking Kilo, Fatboy Deesru, Daniel Hyde, A Guy MPA 81, Nathan Mose, Cole Addict, Matt Salem, Aaron Close, F7, GOS, Matthew Landavazo, My Name is Nobody, Judson N. Alethros, Jensen Wang, Hey There's a Kitty, Greg T. Wanchek, Ren Taro, Matsukata, John Jameson, Sam Venzel, Matthew Lane, Mark Raidmaker, Jan Rauner, Chris Licata, Michael McGee, Meyer Techrans, Eric Jackson, Jonathan, Patrick Grode, 3DS Boy 08, Dominique Koch, Stefan, Original Ross, Sandy Garrido, Sound Derson, Joaquim Hagen, Teak Autumn, Sol Connor, Michael Casa, Andrew S., Z Jits, Aaron Keith, Gregory S. Acker, Endless Loggins, Tom Sanfilippo, Justice Brennan, Zutsu Taylor, Trevor Power Stu, Elenia Nana, Daniel Nishwal, Franco Frederic, Dane Galanowski, Ian Clifford, Axel Cisneros, Leighton Perry, Joseph Karaman, Brett Summers, Blake, Donovan Russell, Nocoella, Zlicki, Martin Porshegi, David Cowden, Ricky Tan, Hulam, Patrick J.S., Justin Staples, Freddie Canos Jr., Stephen Coates, Kiwi Phil, Brucha, Jeremy So, Michelle Pell, Brett Summers, Eddie Del Castillo, Joseph Loria, Luis Correa, Deke, Cheesy Ramen, Tyler Lindley, Tim Robbins, Jake Dude 23, Brian Riggleman, Justin Gower, Caillou, Mark Kelly, Valco Malev, Gabe Langner, Rodney, DNA Tech, Michael Deaton, MJB1, Maurice Courtois, Wesley Sager, Sarcastro, Mai Sharona, Waitrui, William W. Draper, Air Rat, Spamton, G. Spamton, Henry Zhang, Stephen Hart, Christopher A. Butler, Greg, Peter Moore, Amy Will Chief, Justin Thomas, Sam Miller, Semi Malas, James Anderson, Shakir, Nick Rakin, Holden Mobley, Matthew Lazier, R. Pete Sharma, Meat and Pork, Jimmy N.G. Mads, Gordon Freeman, Benjamin Oshley, Mark Mitchell, Shield TV Couteau, John Wissink, Mohammed, Jean Debont, Pulse Media, Sean Ashmont, Daniel Dewar, Stephen Zhang, JSMMH, Georgie Kosteninov, PC Beast 22, Reginald Ari, Narathiel, Ivan, Charles Russell, Hall Booma, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.